tonight's Traffic and Safety Commission meeting. Thank you all for coming. Justin, would you do the roll call?
Commissioner Del Rosario.
Present.
Commissioner Chomsky.
Present.
Chair McCroskey.
Present.
And Commissioners Chavandel and Reeves are absent.
Great. So we have a quorum, unless somebody needs to recuse themselves. Let's move on to approval of minutes from our regular meeting of May 24th. Thank you. Does anybody have any comments on the draft minutes from May 24th? Robert, do you have any comments?
No, but I'll need to abstain because I was missing half of it, I think.
Okay, so we don't have a quorum for the minutes, so we're going to continue that until another time. And that's going to move us along to public comment. And as most of you know, but I'm going to say again, public comment is a chance to make comments on items that are not otherwise on the agenda for this evening. We'll take your comments. Please fill out a comment card so we can get your name right. You can fill it out later if you haven't yet. But we'll take your comments for up to 3 minutes on, as I said, items that are not otherwise on the agenda. We can't respond to your comments as a commission this evening because they haven't been agendized, but we can consider your comments for agendizing in the future. So welcome. Please step right up.
Hi there. Thank you for your time. My name is Alan. I'm with the Solano Avenue Association. I was at a meeting last night until about 10:15 or 10 o'clock p.m. discussing things that businesses have to go through to explain what they're going to do about parking before they open. And the other thing that I want to bring up, well, we're going to talk about that in a second. The other thing that I want to bring up is it was mentioned that I said, that Alan came from the Solano Avenue Association, said that there's been upwards of 30 parking spaces that have been reassigned or relocated or missing in the city in the last couple of years. And actually, I stand by that, and I think that the number is higher. So just as a for instance, when I talk about what people have to go to when they open up a business, they're required to explain how many off-street parking spaces they have, whether or not a parking variance is required. But after they open up their business, if they're a Closet Karma, they can have a bus stop put in front of it. Or if they're a transmission place, they can have a bike lane put in front of it. Just to kind of detail quickly, I know I have 3 minutes, the numbers that I'm talking about. On the north side of Masonic, between Solano and Washington, which would be commonly known as the other side of this, the opposite side of the street of the senior center. There was recently 10 parking spaces that were designated 4-hour and 3 wheelchair accessible spaces. So that's 13 parking spaces on Masonic, right by Abrams Claghorn Gallery, that have been reassigned and used to be used for people who worked at Five Little Monkeys or worked on Solano Avenue and who now have to park further into the residential district. So that's 13 spaces right there. The biggest situation where I can think of that this is a problem is, for instance, a rental car company who is asked when they open up their business where they expect to put their overflow cars and where they plan on parking their vehicles and what the situation is with parking on San Pablo between Marin and Dartmouth. Rental car company opens. You remove all of the parking on the west side of San Pablo between Marin and Dartmouth, and now the residents on Dartmouth are complaining about rental cars parking there. So there are consequences when you change, relocate plans, when you change plans that were part of the inception of a business when they open. And I think the rental car company is a prime example of that. I know that Sprouts does offer parking. It may not be for the public. But as far as San Pablo or Solano is concerned, at Canes, I mean, in front of Hopsy, there's 3 spaces that were lost there, 2 spaces in front of the Y recently, and on and on. So we will eventually detail the amount of parking that has been lost recently or reassigned and present that in a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, guys. Thank you for listening to us. I'm at the 800 block of San Pablo Avenue. Regarding the bike lane, we have talked to the parents around the area.
Can we get your name, sir?
Oh, Larry Okers.
Thank you.
Talking to the moms in the area that the kids live up on Albany Hill, they have big concerns of the bike lane being right next to the road, because if the kids fall, there's no buffer for the kids. Speeding cars come down the road, they're going to get hit. At least with the bike lane being up on the sidewalk, shared sidewalk with the bike lane for the 56 feet of sidewalk there is. The rest of it's all driveways. It would be kind of nice to have a buffer zone with the cars there, so if kids does fall, they're not right in the lane of traffic. That's the problem about the bike lane. It is on San Pablo Avenue. We don't want to tell our kids to go play on the highway. We have a lot of young kids that live up on Albany Hill, and we using that route. So like I say, I'm for at least the bike lane being moved up on the sidewalk, keep the parking, and put the crossing light in, because just the other day a bicycle got hit right there on San Pablo Avenue in front of the shop. So I'm at the San Pablo Avenue with these crazy drivers. They're driving up on the sidewalks. And hitting people. We're hearing it more and more on the news. It's not just here, it's everywhere. I'd like to, say, at least consider it. And with Jeff Bond, I would like to get at least the project number and Caltrans contact, so I could at least talk to them about it. Because, like I say, I've emailed them several times. We haven't heard anything back. So at least we could talk to Caltrans about the approval of this. I just don't want it be all of a sudden, oh, we didn't talk, we didn't get the information, we already approved it, it's done. At least if we could all work together, it'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeanette. I'm a business owner here in Albany for 34 years. And I'm on San Pablo Avenue and Washington. And I understand that there's going to be a bike lane there, which I find it probably not very safe, because we have a gas station on the corner where there are cars coming in on Washington and as well as San Pablo Avenue. Right next to the gas station, there's 2 repair shops, which is cars going in and out all day long. As well as throughout the days, there are tow trucks coming to unload cars into these shops. It takes anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to unload one car. Right next to them, there's me. I'm the dry cleaner, and I have a 20-minute zone in front, which is shared among all of us, the insurance company, the aquarium, and it does well for all of us, as well as my handicapped customers that can't get out of the car. It works well for us. In front of me is a crosswalk where I have witnessed many, many accidents. I've seen senior citizens that get hit and run over. I've seen a father and a son that got run over. I have also seen a kid that got hit where their bike flew up in the air. I do not want to call 911. I am not there to call 911 all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Smolens with Albany Strollers and Rollers. Since Alan Kane mentioned parking, I'll just mention the 7 bike racks that have just been installed over the past couple of months, sponsored by Albany Strollers and Rollers, and installed by the City Public Works, and in great part thanks to Solano Avenue Association that sponsors Albany Strollers and Rollers at the Solano Stroll, and we've been able to add about 250 parking spaces for bicyclists, for customers and clients on Solano. So we're doing our part for that. The new bike racks are 3 on the Ohlone Greenway, which are sponsored by Albany Rotary, and they'll be maintained by Friends of Albany Parks. 1 at Chastey and Malik, 1 at Halpern Law, 1 at California Bank and Trust, which is sponsored by Richard Hong, and 1 right here at City Hall, sponsored by Design Assign. So we're going to have the little credit stickers soon, and so everyone will know who helped provide those. There are now 63 in town, so as I said, about 250 bike parking spaces, which is pretty incredible. When we started this with 6 racks in 2012, we didn't imagine that this would happen. So it's a big accomplishment. I live on the live on the 900 block of Kane, so between Solano and Marin, so I have opportunity to ride the Marin bike lanes quite a bit, and they're good, but there seem to be certain parts that aren't finished yet. There are no dotted lines approaching the corners, and so drivers are supposed to go to when they're approaching the corner, merge into the bike lane to turn right. Otherwise, they're going to right hook people. So the dotted lines between Cornell and San Pablo aren't in yet. Also, there are supposed to be sharrows in the westbound, westernmost 2 blocks in the right turn through lane, because if a bicyclist is in the bike lane on the right and they end up being on San Pablo, they can get right hooked. If they're trying to go across, they'll get right hooked by a right turning vehicle. And also there's a grate that takes up about 3/4 of that cornermost spot of the bike lane. Also, there's supposed to be a bike box, which gives cyclists a place to plant themselves when they are going straight. And I also thought there was supposed to be green skip striping across the intersection at San Pablo. Also, there are 2 locations where cars are parked in the bike lane because there's no red curbs, and those are between San Pablo and Canes on both sides, and between Stanage and Cornell on the south side. And I know I kind of ripped through this stuff really quickly, but I'm sorry, and I didn't have a chance to type anything up, but I have pictures if city staff wants to see, or I can go over that more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Council. My name is Jeremiah Garrett Pinguello.
We're just a commission.
Okay. I'd like to share with you tonight my public comment. I've raised this issue in the past, and I've called Caltrans, and they put it back on the city, and I call the city, and they say call Caltrans. So I call Caltrans back, and I say, hey, well, the city told me to call you guys. They say, well, call the city again. So everybody keeps passing back and forth to each other. But it's a really important issue. And I don't know if you've driven in other cities on San Pablo Avenue. Once you hit the city limits of El Cerrito, right there at the plaza in Wells Fargo, you see all these pedestrian Xing signs on San Pablo. So it's safe to cross San Pablo from the west side to the east side, or the east side to the west side. When you hit Berkeley, you got all these pedestrian crossing signs to have it be safe to cross San Pablo. Within the city limits of Albany, there's not one pedestrian safety crossing sign on San Pablo. So how is it safe for kids that live on Albany Hill walking to the middle school or the high school? How are they supposed to cross a highway if there's no signs for the cars to let the cars know there's even people trying to cross the street? So I make a positive suggestion, not a complaint. A positive suggestion would be to put up, signs. I wrote it down. There's about 8 streets that we need to do it on. And so that's what I'm saying here. This is my good for the city. We have other things on the agenda, but one of the most important things right now is how do you cross San Pablo safely? I mean, you got to just sit and hope a car sees you if you're waiting at Mechanics Bank and just run across. But there should be some sort of safety for school kids trying to cross San Pablo, which is a highway, to go to school in the morning. You got hundreds and thousands of cars, stopping the whole San Pablo, and you got kids trying to cross San Pablo, and it's a highway. And I mean, once you get to Berkeley, there are signs every block, every other block, and they're super high visibility. It feels safe to cross in Berkeley. El Cerrito, you got all these, I don't know, they do it differently. They say yield to pedestrian, and they throw up a white triangle. To me, that's not it. You need these high visibility fluorescent signs with the person that says, pedestrian crossing the street. If a car sees a little white triangle, yield to pedestrians, they don't really know what that is. It's kind of a news sign. It's not really what it's for. I mean, so I really suggest you guys take a look into whose responsibility it is. The cities to throw up a sign, or Caltrans to throw up a sign, how Berkeley got it, how El Cerrito got it. But I think it would behoove the city to make the city a safer place for all these kids trying to cross the street, for any resident of the city or anybody in the city limits trying to cross San Pablo safely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Harry Prine. I've been a resident of Albany since 1973 and a business owner since 1964. You guys figure that one out. I've seen a lot of changes on Solano Avenue. My parents bought Solano Cleaning Center, 1219 Solano Avenue, corner Solano and Talbot. We've seen the beautification process go through, 2-3 times? And yes, we've seen reduction of parking. I brought this up, my dad actually brought it up with the first beautification project when they took out all this diagonal parking across the street, and he talked to the architect and he says, Henry, it's easy to put those parking spots in with an eraser. It's not done yet. Well, the city said it's a library there, it's going to be a great place for people to meet, and it's going to be more or less a civic center. Well, that never happened. I brought it up the second time the city did a beautification project, and still, again, nothing happened. Albany is progressive enough to put in a parklet where a bus stop is supposed to be. I'm wondering, can the city find it in the budget, or somehow, how can we get this ball rolling to pull out all that concrete across the street and increase the parking by maybe 10 extra spots? We have Cornell School there where people are bringing their children, they're dropping off, they need to park, they end up trying to cross the street, and it just gets clogged up. If they're able to pull in, they could get their kids out safely, bring them to school. The realtor across the street, Winkler, he has 12, 13 employees, and they regularly park in the timed meter zone. And that's kind of not conducive for customer turnover. And so I was just wondering, hey, just came in here. I think this would be a great place to voice my opinion, and wondering what we could do or I could do to start this ball rolling. Do I need to get signatures or what? So if the city wants to do something progressive, let's get some more parking in this congested area, because Lower Solano is being more popular, and it's forcing people who are coming into our town to park in residence in front of their homes. And we come home from work and we're exhausted and tired, and we have no place to park, so we have to park in El Cerrito and walk. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to comment on things that are not on the agenda tonight?
My name is Rhoda Bennett, and I live at 950 Cornell Avenue, and I moved here about 1976. And I agree with him. I've never heard this idea before, but you do have, I don't know if the Albany YMCA, if they're still in the old library there, and that would add parking for those parents who bring their children there. Because as far as I know, there was no parking for the library even when it was there. But the sidewalk is very wide, and if it's a feasible idea, I think it's a great idea. Years ago, I had wanted, a thought was to add parking over by Cornell School on, what's the street above Cornell? Is that Talbot? By the school where they have a garden now. Years ago, I thought that would be an excellent place to have parking for the teachers and stuff to pull in towards the school building. They could have put about 8 parking spots there, but instead they put a garden there, which is cool for the kids, but it would have added some nice and needed parking. And but I think that's a fantastic idea. And we are losing a lot of parking places to these new bicycle racks, which he was kind of bragging about.
Please, let's not have a discussion on the floor. Thank you.
Where I've seen some removed, like over in Berkeley by out of the closet.
We can't address Berkeley here either.
Yeah, but there's like two and a half parking spots that are totally gone because they've got bicycle racks in them. And I don't know if Albany's doing that or planning on doing that, but sometimes that's taking up parking, and that would add some. So I agree with that.
All right. Seeing no one else for public comment, last chance. Let's move this on to item number 5.1, our monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Thank you. The month of May showed one pedestrian collision, roughly in line with recent months, one bicycle collision. Vehicle collisions were 5 total collisions, and I believe 2 injury collisions. Citations this month, 45 citations were issued, and 3 DUI arrests. And that concludes the police data.
Are there any questions from the commission on the data or the information shown? Okay. Any comments or questions from the public?
On this,
Can I get you to step to the microphone, sir? Thank you.
Larry Oakers, on the police department, when cars get hit out there, they don't want to take reports. How do you guys get the collision reports?
I believe these are only reported collisions.
So they don't, all the accidents out there don't get reported if the police don't show up. So that is not a true statement up here then.
These are reports from
Only reports,
police
not,
data.
because police won't come out and take accident reports anymore. So this is only reports that are forced on the police department to take then, basically.
These are reports that are
Okay, that's it.
police
Thank you.
collected data.
Any other comments or questions? I'll bring it back to the commission. Any comments, opinions, questions for the future? No? I'd like to thank staff for getting the data linked into the agenda. Appreciate it. Thank you, Justin. Seeing no other comments, I think we'll move ahead. Let's go to item number 6 and start out with the item number 6.1, the request for an accessible parking space at 837 Talbot Avenue.
This is a request from a tenant in a 3-unit building who expressed cannot park in the small garages that are part of the building. He has tried to park both on the the north side, the far left of the picture. He's tried to park sort of tucked in on multiple places within the driveway, but has gotten into conflict with the other tenants and is requesting a blue curb space. The curb in front of this building between this driveway and the next driveway accommodates 2 vehicles. It's about 46 feet in length, so this would take up one of those spaces. This is off of Solano, so the tenant has expressed having difficulty with nearby street parking when he comes in times that are high demand along Solano.
Questions from the commission?
So, staff, you said that he can't park in the garage? It's not wide enough, or?
Yeah, he has expressed he has a large vehicle and it can't, be accommodated in the garage space.
And are those the garage spaces that you pull in off of the driveway and then you turn right into? Is that correct?
Yes, it's a
Underneath?
turn right into those. They're the first floor, the front of the building is the garages.
Okay.
And you didn't state, but just to confirm, the resident or the requester understands that this is not a designated parking space, but a signed parking space that's available to anyone who has a placard.
I have reminded him to that.
Okay.
I do have other pictures if you want to see the garages more closely. I can.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Perry, do you have any questions? No. Is there anyone who's planning to make public comment on this item? Okay.
Is that his vehicle? Ah. Got it.
So we have no public comment. Does anybody want to make a motion?
Sorry, now that I see this picture,
Yep.
so is this an example of a parking configuration that the tenant is using now, or I'm not sure what we're looking at here?
I think it's,
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah,
Yeah.
so this is one of the attempts of the tenant to park, just blocking I assume his garage space, but was not sufficient.
Oh, I see. So
not
so if he
obstruct
parks in the
others.
driveway, then it ends up obstructing multiple garage spaces, which doesn't work for the other tenants, I see.
Any further questions or comments? Can I get a motion?
yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the conversion of one street parking space in front of 837 Talbot Avenue to a blue curb accessible parking space.
A second?
Please come to the
Comment?
mic.
My name is Harry Prine. I live at 841 Talbot. If you roll back a slide, you'll see my house right next to this apartment building. I'm quite familiar with the situation. Daryl is a nice guy. He doesn't mind parking his truck like this. The other tenant doesn't drive at all, and the third tenant has a spot on the far left. She says she doesn't have a problem getting the truck in, or her car in and out. It just seems to be like a feud between the landlord and the tenant. So Daryl's like, if I can't park here, then I got to park out in the street. And well, there we go with parking situations in Albany again, because there's not enough parking on Solano. So overflow parking goes into the residence area. So he's like, where else can I park? But he's has a disability. He's a retired CHP officer, and he's looking for a place close enough to his house so he doesn't have to walk all over the place, and he's asking for a handicap placard and a parking spot. I don't have a problem with that. But that, again, is what's happening because of the parking situation in Albany. So if this goes in...
Have you thought about running for council?
I was already former president of Solano Avenue Association, and Mr. Alan Kane is executive director, who does an outstanding job. So who's going to pay for the parking sign? I mean, it's just a sign and a little paint?
There's a fee associated, a yearly fee associated with handicap parking spot in
Okay.
front of a domicile in Albany.
Okay, who pays for that, the tenant or the landlord?
The tenant, or the requester.
So it goes either way?
The requester pays.
The requester. And if he moves out, does it revert back to a regular parking spot then?
I believe at the end of a year, or the year that it was requested, it would, yes.
Oh, okay. And how much is that fee?
I don't know.
It's about $400 or so for the installation. The application is $50 or so.
And then every year you have to pay $400? Or
No,
just a
we
one-time fee?
we regularly inventory them and confirm that they're still in use and needed.
So there isn't a yearly fee, so I misspoke.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments? I think this is a reasonable thing to do. Did you?
There's a motion.
You did a motion? We had a
There's a motion
second?
and my
a second.
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So the space is approved. So we're going to move on to item number 6.2, the part where we're going to remove all the parking spaces between the BART tracks and the Berkeley City line. Don't leave now.
That's a perfect introduction. I'm the parking removal fairy. No, I'm just kidding.
Where are you guys going? I'm not actually being serious, of course.
Actually, it's an awesome program.
Welcome.
Hello, thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Megan Woolley Osdahl, and I work for Tool Design Group. We're a planning, engineering, and landscape architecture firm, and I'm very excited to be here with you tonight to talk about the Solano Avenue Complete Streets and Corridor Revitalization Plan. So I wanted to let you know that our team on the project includes my firm, Tool Design Group, as well as Opticos, an urban design firm based in Berkeley, and a local government commission, which is a firm specializing in outreach based in Sacramento.
May I interrupt you for just one moment?
Sure.
I need to make something very clear at this point in the meeting. I may run into a situation where I need to recuse myself on this item because I own property within 500 feet of the intersection of Solano and Santa Fe Avenue. This piece is on the docket tonight as kind of a general information and talking about input that's been granted so far. We're not taking any decisions. We're not making any rulings. But if we get to the point where something specific comes up about the area around the intersection of Santa Fe and Solano and not general about the whole street, then I will just stand up and leave the room, and you'll know what I'm doing. At that point, you become the chair.
Sure.
As the co-chair, and we'll keep moving along. Thank you. And
Vice
sorry to
Chair?
interrupt.
Is Fareed Vice Chair? Is that what's?
I'm sorry. Is Fareed vice chair?
I don't
But
remember.
I'll be fine with doing that.
Is
I don't
it
know if
okay
you want
with
just
you, Robert?
parliamentary
Fine with
rise.
me if Robert does.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm going to designate Robert,
That sounds good.
and we can keep going.
Do we want to separate out that section of the conversation? Is that possible, or is it not?
My presentation actually doesn't go into detail about individual
Okay.
intersections, or it's more general in nature. So maybe I'll keep going, and then if you feel like you do need to leave, then I can take a break.
I think it might come up more in public comment
Sure.
or in discussion on the dais.
Sure. Okay, I keep going. Okay. Well, tonight I'm going to give an overview of the project, including existing conditions, our initial design recommendations, and then next steps for the overall process. So we kicked off the project in February, and since then our team has conducted an existing conditions analysis, and we've also developed an existing conditions base map of the corridor. So we held a design workshop in Charette in late May, and then over the summer we'll be busy developing designs for the corridor. So we're planning to host a pop-up event in September, and during that time, we'll ask for the community's feedback on the draft designs. And we'll also be returning back to you, to the Traffic and Safety Commission, again in the fall and the winter, to go through the recommendations and the design ideas for the project area. We anticipate taking the draft plan to the council in early 2019. So the work that we're doing for this project focuses on Upper Solano Avenue. So this is Masonic to Tulare. Lower Solano Avenue, as I'm sure you're aware, has recently received streetscape upgrades, and so it's not included in this plan. However, the aspects that are working well are definitely kind of jumping off points for Upper Solano Avenue. So the focus of our plan is streetscape and infrastructure improvements along Solano Avenue. And the plan's really focused on design upgrades for pedestrians, transit riders, and drivers. So we'll also address bicycle connections to the corridor, but really the vision for this plan is that bicyclists will be primarily served by parallel bike routes, such as Marin, and that we'll be thinking about how to get folks across Solano at different intersections, how to make it easy for people to bike when they are, or bike and park when they're coming to visit restaurants and shops and that kind of thing along Solano. So as we develop the designs, we want to ensure that these designs are in line with the community's goals for the corridor. So the draft goals that you see here were developed based on feedback from the community during the design workshop that was held in May. And so this includes improving safety for all users, enhancing access to transit, providing a cohesive streetscape, and supporting local economic activity. So as a first step in our process, we conducted an existing conditions review. Overall, the corridor has many assets, so I do want to say that up front. However, our existing conditions review really looked at what could benefit from an upgrade or from repairs. So that's what I'm going to be sort of focusing on during these next couple of slides. So our analysis found that the corridor has wide streets that can encourage driving at speeds higher than the posted speed. There are long crossing distances, non-compliant curb ramps that kind of force people sometimes into the intersection. There's some missing pedestrian push buttons and crosswalks at some locations. And as you're probably very familiar with, many of the intersections are atypical, and they can be difficult for motorists, pedestrians, and bicyclists to cross across Solano Avenue. And then there's also poor sight lines for drivers when they're parking or backing out of the parking spaces. For transit riders, the infrastructure at different bus stops varies along the corridor. In some locations, there can be a lack of coordination between the bus stops and the crosswalks. And then also, some bus stops are rarely used, and these are referred to as ghost stops. And so AC Transit is currently studying the possibility of removing these stops to increase bus efficiency along the corridor. Currently, when you consider the corridor as a whole, Upper Solano Avenue lacks a cohesive streetscape and also some landmarks that help people understand where they are along the corridor. The corridor also has many narrow sidewalks, especially we found on the south side of the street. And in some locations, tree roots have damaged the sidewalks, which cause tripping hazards. We heard that a lot during the design workshop. And then parts of the street also has inconsistent landscaping, trees, and pedestrian scale lighting. The corridor does have many locally owned businesses, and as a part of our plan, we really want to develop policies and recommendations that support these vibrant businesses and that also encourage new businesses to locate on the corridor as appropriate, of course. So, for an overview of the walk audit and the workshop, to gather the community's input about what they would like to see on Upper Solano Avenue, we held a multi-day charrette or design workshop. On the first day, the community was invited to participate in a walk audit, and so we led groups of folks along the corridor, and they were able to write down their observations or their ideas on walk audit maps. And then after the walk, we came back and we held a community workshop, which was attended by about 40 people. And during the workshop, people shared their comments on large maps, as you can see here in this photo. And we also had an interactive online tool called Mentimeter, where we asked people their thoughts about if you had $1 million for improvements along Solano Avenue, how would you use it? Or what do you see as a family-friendly street? So we were able to gather ideas like such as those in real time. And then we also had comment cards that people could leave their thoughts. Themes that we heard from the workshop included an interest in improving the sidewalks, crosswalks, and curb ramps, slowing traffic, installing more public and gathering spaces, including outdoor dining, and planting more trees and landscaping. So after the workshop, the team got to work on developing designs for the corridor based on the feedback, based on data from the existing conditions analysis, and also some creative design ideas. And we also met with representatives from the Center for the Blind and visited business owners along the corridor to gather different perspectives from different users of the street. So the design for Upper Solano Avenue aims to serve pedestrians by lowering vehicle speeds in creating frequent accessible crossings and comfortable, inviting spaces. I want to let you know that these designs here are from a complete streets guide that we worked on for the city of Boston. So they don't necessarily reflect exactly what we're going to be proposing for Solano Avenue, but they kind of provide examples of concepts that we're thinking about for the street. The plan also aims to serve motorists by developing designs that reduce conflicts and also provide well-maintained intersections and safe turning movements for drivers. So through our designs, we want to create a space that is safe and friendly for all users. So this includes dedicating more space to pedestrians in public areas by potentially narrowing travel lane widths. Creators shorten crossing distances by enhancing the curb extensions and possibly installing medians to both square up the intersection geometry and to slow traffic along the corridor. Repairing sidewalks and removing obstacles to people with mobility or visual impairments, or people who are using strollers, that kind of thing. And then also facilitating bicycle connections along the perpendicular routes and across Solano, as I talked about earlier. The design also aims to serve transit riders by providing comfortable and accessible transit stops that accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists, and creating a transit service that has minimal delay along the corridor. So some recommendations are to improve the access to transit is placing transit and placemaking nodes in key locations. So this is an example from Lower Solano Avenue, the bus parklet there, that combines a bus stop with a creative idea for placemaking as well. Improving alignment of the bus stops and crosswalks, and removing the ghost stops that I discussed earlier. We also want to create more vibrancy and a lively streetscape. So this means enhancing public art, lighting, and landscaping. Also looking for opportunities to install murals or green walls along blank walls, and other design features, and possibly slowing traffic by visually narrowing the corridor, such as using contrasting surfacing between the roadway and the parking area. So that's kind of one idea that we're exploring right now. We also want to have this plan support local businesses. So we are going to be including retail revitalization strategies that build on the existing business ecosystem and really build upon what's there now, and then also creating public spaces for gathering and outdoor dining. The design will also pay a special attention to what's becoming our street's most important real estate, which is the curb, which I think was really heard by a lot of the comments tonight. We're going to consider curbside activities just like parking, loading and unloading, waste management, bus stops, and parklets. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions. I want to remind you that we'll be back to see you again twice more, and we invite you to come participate in the September pop-up event that we'll be holding. And for more updates about the process, you can visit the city's SolanoCompleteStreets.org website, and Ann and Justin are our city contacts for this project, and so they're also available for questions as well.
What day is the September pop-up?
So we haven't decided on the day specifically. We're looking at late September, most likely. We want folks to come back from holidays and school to be back in session, so we're aiming for late September. Mm-hmm.
Questions?
Well, I'm interested in the suggestion to make parking zones a different color from the driving zones. Do you know of an area nearby where we can see a treatment like that in action? I don't think I've seen it before.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can follow up and loop back with my colleagues to share some examples, because picture's worth 1,000 words, right? Yeah, so the examples that I've seen are to put different colored paving under the parking so that when motorists are driving, it doesn't seem like an expansive roadway. It serves to more psychologically narrow the road. But can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you have the speed data for Solano to understand how fast the traffic is moving at different times of day? And is it indeed an issue that has to be addressed?
That's a great question. We don't have the speed data, so the comments that we heard about people driving faster came from a meeting that we had with our advisory committee. Mm-hmm. So we are, or the city has organized an advisory committee as a part of this process, and there are representatives from businesses and from other organizations, from community members, and then other people that serve on commissions at the city. And so when we had our first meeting in April, people shared that they had the perception that as folks drove up Lower Solano, it was more constrained. And then once they reached Masonic, the speeds increased because it felt wider, more kind of the ability to go faster. So I will say that that's based on perception and not necessarily data for the speeds, but it is very valuable for how it feels to cross the street there.
Okay. Can I keep going with my questions?
Yeah.
The parking lane on each side, so the angled parking, have any ideas come up about any different treatments of that, whether it's changing the angles to get wider sidewalks? I know that parking has been looked at already last year with this group as a parking study, but I don't know if the geometry of the parking lanes has been looked at.
Yes, we are looking at that. Understanding the interest that parking is a critical component of a vibrant Main Street. So, but we are looking at, are there different ways to configure the parking, especially in areas where there are some locations where parking spaces, when motorists back out of the parking spaces, they actually back into the crosswalks. And there are other parking spaces that are disabled parking that could be improved and could better serve the users of those spaces. And so we are taking an eye towards how can parking be improved for everyone who wants to be in the corridor, so obviously for drivers, but then also to improve it for people who are walking along the corridor.
But I was thinking more along the lines of if the angle of the parking space is changed, you can maybe gain a couple of feet of sidewalk or something along those lines.
Yes, that's right. We are looking into that. That's right. Mm-hmm.
Are you also looking into back-in angled parking?
So that's a topic that came up during the workshop. Some folks had suggested back-in angle parking. So that can be. It can have benefits, especially if people are bicycling along the corridor. It gives bicyclists more visibility, but it can also be sort of tricky for folks to wrap their minds around about backing into the spaces. So we're still exploring different issues, and we're also working with the city to see sort of like what fits best amongst the context here in Albany. So I will say we're still very much in the design. Ideas are on the table, but we also want something that once we develop it, it's practical for your community. So.
I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the workshop, and I got most of my questions answered then, and it's great to see the progress. Thank you.
Great.
Are there any questions or comments from the public on this? Why don't you come on up to the microphone?
Hi, Alan Kane, Solano Avenue Association. I'm going to start off with just the two tiny negative things, and that is, I've heard the parking study referred to several times in the last 24 hours. That parking study included Marin prior to the Complete Streets project, which removed parking spaces on Marin. So as far as I'm concerned, the study that included parking on Marin needs to be rethought out as far as that's concerned. The second thing, as far as aligning the crosswalks, I can see the need for aligning the crosswalks on the street. A lot of them force wheelchair users to kind of go out kitty corner. At the same time, my only input on that is if the crosswalks were lined up, crosswalk to crosswalk, on the north side of Solano Avenue, skateboarders would have a field day going down the street, as well as bicyclists. I've seen it. I almost got hit by a skateboarder coming out of China Village today. So it's just my only little comment. On the way out the door, of course, you had made the comment, hey, Solano's coming up on the agenda. Harry asked me, dude, why aren't you going to stay? It's Solano. And I said, man, they have it under control. These consultants are great. So me walking out the door was actually a vote of confidence, honestly, aside from the one crosswalk issue that I have with skateboarders, and that would only be the downhill side. well, I guess it's downhill on both sides.
Right now, it's impractical on the
Right.
south side, but just because there's no space.
Well,
But if
you
it
have
was
to turn a
widened-
lot. You have to go around trees a lot on this.
Right,
yeah.
so that actually works.
That's why we took the Lunar New Year parade and actually moved it to the other side of the street. It was sunnier and all that. But the consultants have done a fantastic job. I mean, seriously, the outreach to the community, the workshops and everything, they were just spot on. And that's why I was going to walk out the door, and that's why I'm going to walk out the door now. They've got it all under control. Have a
Good night. Thank you. Please.
Rhoda Bennett. Did I miss how we're going to pay for this? The things that you suggest, how is it going to get paid for? Who's?
So if you could ask your questions, and then we'll respond after you
Oh,
finish speaking.
Okay. Like, I know that the improvements would be great. The lower Solano looks great. The eucalyptus trees trunks are getting huge and doing more damage to the sidewalks and stuff. And I think they got a really good deal on them years ago, and that's probably why we ended up with them. But they didn't realize how big they would get and how big around the circumference. And it would be nice if we could replace them with a uniform kind of tree. Maybe a little bit of variety, though, so if some die or get a bug, they don't all die. But if we could replace those, it might be less hazard of things falling off of them and stuff, too. The taller they get, the harder you get hit. But I was also wondering, do you ever look at, Petaluma and those places that have the little lights that come on in the sidewalk when pedestrians want to cross the street? I think those make it more pedestrian friendly, and it really helps to get the cars to stop for people who are crossing midway in areas. And I know the lighting up by Safeway has always been pretty bad, and that's a pretty heavily used intersection as far as people going across there pedestrian-wise. And I think something needs to definitely be done for lighting in that area. And a lot of times the lights are out, and it's pretty dark. So also I'm noticing that we're getting these new kind of crosswalks that have the lines that go just the opposite of how they used to when I was growing up. And it seems like, and I live by Cornell and Marin, and there's all this green and all these stripes and all this stuff. This stuff's going to get expensive to redo, and a lot of the areas that have already done this in past years are starting to look bad. Is anybody looking at funding for repainting this stuff when time's due that it all has to be redone? It's massive. And I know it's nice to have bike lanes and all that kind of stuff, but there's a cost to it. So I just wondered if those suggestions might be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Amy Smullins again. I agree with you about the eucalyptus trees. I walk up and down Solano a couple times a few times a week, and it's like an obstacle course there. But that said, I participated in the walking audit, a workshop, and a meeting, and really appreciate the consultants taking the input and really having a lot of give and take. That Mentimeter thing was pretty amazing. If you guys didn't get a chance to try, it was an online, immediate survey. It was pretty cool. So thanks for doing that. I ride my bike on Solano. I walk up and down. I take the bus. So I'm really excited about all the enhancements that are going to help make Solano safer and more pleasant for everybody, and for the shop owners, make it more accessible. So looking forward to continuing to be part of that. And if Albany Strollers and Rollers, we've funded some bike racks and part of the parklet and some pumps. So we'd be happy to offer some funding to part of a project that has to do with active transportation. When you get into the specifics of it, it's something that we would definitely be able to fund, something that's going to make it better for people who want to walk and bike there. As far as the car parking, I live on the 900 block of Kane, so I'm a half a block from Solano. if Solano Avenue car parking spots are full, I expect people to park in front of my house. They will park in front of my house. It's not my parking space. So, you know, when you're a resident and you live a half block from Solano Avenue, it's great because we get to walk there, and then other people want to park there. So, you know, if parking spots are lost, come park in front of my house. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? We had some comments that I'd like to respond to. First of all, this process is not only interfacing with the Traffic and Safety Commission. There are other parts of city government that are involved, and especially as regards trees, the Park and Rec Department is the organization that you want to interface with. We sometimes designate areas of sidewalk uplift, but they're responsible for choosing trees, and they oversee the removal or non-removal of trees, just for your information. The issue of funding for implementing these projects was brought up, and in general, the city seeks grant funding to fund implementation of the projects that come out of a process like this. Those can happen over a period of time. We did a similar Complete Streets project on Buchanan and San Pablo Avenues, and some of the things that were talked about in public comment tonight are part of what's rolling out from that as grant funding becomes available for the different parts of that. So it's a many-year process, but hopefully we can get set up to implement some good things in the future. Lighting, as I understand, has definitely been taken into consideration and has certainly been on the minds of the commission in recent years, and we'll be following that. And, painting and striping, the only thing I want to say about that is that there are only so many tools we have to help slow and direct traffic in our city, and painting happens to be one of the most available and in many ways cheapest, even with the advanced painting that you were talking about in your comment. So we think that that's a pretty good benefit to be able to do that, even if it costs to keep it up. So that's a little background. Were there any opinions about this that commissioners wanted to express now that we've had comment?
I did want to talk about the bus stops, and I know that
you might mention your other job.
Yes, I am a transportation planner with AC Transit, and I know that Ann is coordinating, I think, with some staff at AC Transit. I'm trying to stay hands off, but at least at the dais I can make some comments. So I know that transit in general, it is a good thing to try to thin out the stops. Of course, there's trade-offs because people want to go to bus stops and ride the bus, but it definitely slows the bus down. So removing stops is a good thing, but I think it has to be done in a very thoughtful way. You want to make sure that you keep the stops that have high ridership or serve good locations, and you don't want the stop spacing to be uneven. There's something about a regularity that, okay, I know if I'm walking out to Solano Avenue, if I just walk 2 blocks in either direction, I'll hit a bus stop. So usually when removing bus stops, you probably have to look at the spacing again to make sure that it's evened out. And most transit agencies have bus stop policies about spacing that you can follow. I looked at the stops, and some of them are great, some of them are pretty old. I think there are definitely some substandard bus stops. I can think of 1 or 2 on this section of Solano. So those should be optimized. We want to give people who have ADA, who need ADA access to make sure that it's there for all of these bus stops. And I think the other piece is that we should really look at, there's the stoplet model, of course, and it looks like you guys are looking at that as the one in front of the yogurt shop, as a model for enhancing these remaining bus stops as nodes, or good places to be, other than just waiting for the bus, but even for waiting for the bus, a great place to be. because it's going to get tricky once you start talking about bus stops and you start talking about lengthening them. Then maybe there's parking impacts, and the adjacent businesses could get concerned about that. So I think throwing that olive branch out there of some type of partnership and making great places would be really good with the bus stops. But yeah, I think just thinking about it in a more systematic approach as opposed to just yanking two out. And then the other thing is far side bus stops are preferred. On Solano, it's a slow street, and if you have the bus stops on the near side and the sidewalk is bulbed out, then it's not a big issue to have a near side stop. But generally, far side stops are preferred. I think that's it on bus stops.
Seems like everything is going along great. I don't have anything to add.
Great. I too think things are going along great. One thing I would add is that enforcement be considered as part of the program. I know currently in areas with lots of restaurants after 4 or 5, especially on a dark winter's night, there's a lot of double parking. Mm-hmm. And you did bring up curb space and pick up and drop off, and I think those issues overlap, especially with rideshare and other developing things. Thank you very much for bringing the presentation, and we look forward to seeing the progress as it goes. And
Thank you very much for having me, and look forward to seeing you in the fall.
If I can add one comment, which is just a reinforcement, that it seems on Lower Solano, some of the greatest spaces that were created out of Lower Solano are the places where the city bowled out the corners significantly. So by the post office, by the Mexican restaurant, by Tata Cafe, now you have outdoor seating. You have a lot of kids that hang out there after school, and they seem to be really functioning places. It's tied, I think there was a comment earlier about the area in front of the YMCA. It's tied to the use of the adjacent property. So if there's a cafe there and people hang out there, and the YMCA doesn't have a whole bunch of uses that interact with the sidewalk as much as they do. But I think that model of really making these mini plazas at corners, if it's repeated on Upper Solano, will be really successful.
And there's some good target areas for that because it's actually closer to the high school.
Yeah.
And it's an open campus, so that they do come over to Solano for lunchtime.
Good point.
All right. So I'd like to close that item, unless staff has any. Nope. Okay. Closing that item and moving on to item 6.3. This is 15 or 20 mile per hour school speed zones. And we'll take a presentation from staff.
Thank you. So as background, the California Vehicle Code allows 15 or 20 mile per hour school zones in what are the categories they're allowed in are residential districts with a maximum of 2 traffic lanes and speed limits that are 30 miles per hour or less outside of the school zone and within 500 feet of that school. These criteria eliminate Buchanan, Solano, and Marin Avenues. However, these are the roadways often raised as safety concerns by parents. The city has focused a lot of efforts on the crossing points and the intersections to address those concerns. Generally, the interest in reducing speed limits is based on the fact that slower vehicles have reduced the risk of serious injury in the event of a collision. That's the intent. The segments that do qualify we didn't do any new traffic counts for this report, but in the past, as these segments have not seen really high issue of speeding in the counts that have been taken by staff in the past. The areas that the city has focused, was brought to this commission recently, was the school crossing guard program and the parents' interest in maintaining that program. Staff also continues to receive concerns regarding parent drop-off and pickup and the loading and parent and student behaviors at those times, causing taking illegal spaces, kids crossing at unsafe locations. The process to institute a reduced speed, 15 or 20 mile per hour school zone in the segments that would qualify. The state recommends that these be implemented as part of a broader school traffic control plan prepared by the school, law enforcement, and traffic officials. The law does require that an engineering study be conducted before lowering the speed limit, but changes to the state law have allowed that a city council, even if the engineering study doesn't support the reduction, a city council can choose to go ahead with the reduced speed, even if the engineering study does not lead to that recommendation. Staff believes that space for pickup and drop-off and corresponding driver-student behavior are a bigger street safety issue around schools, but staff can evaluate this further as part of the school safety evaluation that was discussed during the school crossing guard program. We'll just talk about this in the update a little bit later, but the school crossing guard program was funded for this coming year with the intent that community development staff would work with the police department to evaluate broader school safety and as part of the recommendation on what happens with that program going forward. So this further evaluation of speeds could be done as part of that broader effort. Happy to answer additional questions.
Would Traffic and Safety Commission be the overseeing body on the school evaluation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Can you explain the criteria one more time? The only streets that would qualify for the lower speed limit under the Safe Routes to School designation are streets that are residential and are also 2 lanes or less in each direction and have a speed limit, existing speed limit below of 30 or below?
That's correct.
Okay. So any street that's non-resident, any street that's not residential automatically doesn't qualify?
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? So for example, on Buchanan, there's a school on one side and residential on the other. Is that considered residential? Because the same situation exists at other schools and it's shown as.
Are you asking why on the south side of Buchanan it's not drawn in?
Actually, I'm asking why west of Jackson it's not drawn in. On Buchanan.
On Buchanan.
I'm not trying to,
You're asking why
nitpick.
Buchanan's
I'm just
not
wondering.
part of it?
Yeah, I'm wondering why
Buchanan's
Buchanan.
more than 2 travel lanes.
I always say it's not 2 travel lanes in each direction. It's more than 2 travel lanes, period. Thank you. Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Other questions from the commission? You still thinking, Harry?
I'm just trying
Take your
to
time.
look at each block and make sure I understand why each block that's
Criteria.
not marked on this map is not marked.
So one clarification, I did not mark south of Buchanan Street along Jackson because we don't regulate those roads. That's within University Village. So I didn't specify that that's why that is out. But Buchanan, Marin have more travel lanes. Marin is down to 1 in each way, but I believe the turn lane is still considered, but I've seen different descriptions of the rule. So that's my interpretation. Would need others to do a more legal evaluation of that if someone thought otherwise.
Okay, I can continue to ponder this while we go on with the discussion. Thanks.
Are there any other questions from the commission before we take public comment? All right, let's open it to public comment.
Thank you for doing this map. My name is Jeremiah. Thank you for doing this map. A few just positive suggestions. The one there on Jackson and Buchanan, if you could just extend it all the way down to Solano. I mean, I know it might be a lot to ask, but that's a really fast street for cars. I mean, you got cars coming down Solano and avoiding the whole San Pablo thing, and you just turn left down at the bottom of Solano right there at the hill, and that's a really fast street is Jackson. Maybe you can continue that all the way to Solano. One suggestion is that you look at it as 1,000 feet from the school instead of the 500. I think you should go for the 1,000 feet to make it extra safe. If we're going to go this mile, you might as well do 1,000 feet. I suggest around the high school, it's great that you did Key Route and the 2 side streets, but also it would be nice to continue down Carmel. Just make an entire square around the school because you have playgrounds, okay? You have playgrounds on Carmel, and there's no line to make that a school zone, but yet you have children playing there. I mean, might as well just go all the way around the high school, make one big square, call it a day there, make it safe, right? Cornell and Talbot, it's great. You did the whole streets. It would be nice to have just right there on Solano and Marin. So you did a great job on these. St. Mary's. St. Mary's could use an actual pedestrian crossing sign on the crosswalks there. I went there the other day, and there's no pedestrian crossing there. There's just crosswalks painted on the ground, so you might want to throw up a pedestrian crossing sign up there as well. I have another idea about a new crosswalk up by St. Mary's also. It actually leads into a driveway, so it's a little off. That may or may not work. So yeah, this map is great. And what about the school up on Albany Hill? Is that elementary school still there? I don't see any lines regarding the elementary school up there on Jackson and Albany Hill.
It's currently a child care center and pre-K.
And pre-K, well, there you go. Pre-kindergarten, the youngest school possibly, and you don't even have a line up there to make it a school zone. So we want to make that safe because these kids are, crawling. They're not even walking yet. So they get out of the cars and they crawl in the middle of the street. So that one could have a line up there. And also, I'm not sure where McGregor is anymore these days. I don't know if McGregor is part of one of these schools.
It's currently housed at the high school.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so that's just already done there. All right, well, thank you very much.
Jeremiah, while you're up,
Yeah.
I know you've been advocating for school zones for a long time now.
Thank you.
And we appreciate that. What do you expect to get? What result do you expect to see
This
from
is a great
adding school
result.
zones? No.
Okay.
No. If school zones were implemented in any one of these locations, what result are you looking for?
That is the result. That school zones are actually implemented and school zones are actually in the municipal code
So
book.
just having a school zone, you expect there to be more safety?
Absolutely.
Is that the
That's a
implication?
start. It's a start. Without these school zones established, without these lines, without these meetings, without these maps, without the parents' input and people's input to make our schools safer, this is the start. This is what I've been looking for is you guys taking initiative and having this meeting with this map drawn out and actually going to make these things a real thing.
Well, wait a sec. We haven't agreed to that yet. We're still exploring. So I'm looking to understand. It sounds like having a school zone is an end result for you.
Having a school zone is the goal. I mean, right now we don't even have school zones in our municipal code book. And you check many other cities in California, there are
I'm just
school
asking
zones.
about what the result that you want is and why.
The result I would like is school zones in the municipal code book to make our schools safer for a reduced school speed zone. I've been asking, I suggest 15 miles an hour, and everybody's going to say that's too slow. But the point is to make schools safer. The point is to...
Okay, so do you have any data that suggests that school zones in and of themselves being designated result in a safer environment around the school?
Yeah, absolutely. You could look at school zones videos on YouTube, and it just makes schools safer around.
So people saying on YouTube that it's safer?
Absolutely.
Are there studies that have been done that show that school zones inherently make it safer around a school?
Absolutely. I would guarantee that. Because with these school zones, we're making a reduced speed, like you have all these parents driving fast, okay? And then with this, more signage will go up for cars, more pedestrian crossing signs. In the past few years, I've got a pedestrian crossing sign put up on Cornell and Talbot. There were no signs for cars to say there was even a school on the street. But with the sign, it gives cars a chance to say, hey, there's a school on the street, maybe I'll drive slower.
Okay,
Okay.
I think you've answered my question. Thank
I
you.
want to ask you another question about data while we're on the subject. Do you have any knowledge of what speeds people are currently driving on the blocks that are marked in black on this map during school drop-off and pickup times?
Yes. My grandparents and I grew up at 944 Cornell Avenue on Cornell in Albany, between Marin and Solano. It's mid-block on Cornell. And we got my grandma a dog one time, and the door opened, the dog ran out, ran in the middle of the street, and got hit by a car that was speeding 30, 35 miles an hour. And you have UPS trucks that speed down that street. Cornell is a very fast street. I know cars get hit all the time. Their windows get popped off. There was just an accident last week on Cornell. One of the neighbors got a mirror knocked off, and the next neighbor got their car scraped. And then we got my grandma another dog, and the same thing happened to the second dog, ran out. And there's no speed bumps on this street. I've suggested to put speed bumps on Cornell because there's a school right there, but the city won't put a speed bump because there's an old folks home at the end of the block. So I've done what I could. I've tried to come to these meetings. I've got at least cooperation with the city to put up some signs, so I've seen a difference, and I like the change, and I'm going to keep coming to these meetings and keep making a difference and keep seeing a positive change for the city with school zones, reduced school zones. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there others who wish to comment? Please.
My name is Rhoda Bennett. I live at 950 Cornell, and I've known Jeremiah since before he was born, because they're my next door neighbors. And years ago, my son almost got hit, and I live mid-block. I'm one house down from his grandparents. And I think my son was in junior high, or the middle school at that time, and he was going to head out the driveway, and he almost got hit by a car that was parked on the wrong side of the street. And that started me being concerned about safety issues around schools. And I actually started a petition to ask for reduced speeds at that time, because when we moved there, approximately summer of 1976, I believe, my son started kindergarten that next year, and they tore down Cornell School. We witnessed that. And the speed limit used to be 15 miles an hour on our street, and there used to be a crosswalk mid-block. And when they redid the street, they took out the crosswalk, and the speed limit is now 25 miles an hour, and you don't get a ticket unless you're going 30, which is twice what legally used to be considered safe. I have witnessed many accidents. I can't remember specifically the year, but soon after we moved there, somebody went to turn in their driveway, and a post office Jeep, at that time they were using our street quite a bit, post office Jeep was heading down towards Marin, and he couldn't slow down fast enough for the car going in the driveway, and he flipped over. Fortunately, there was no car parked in front of my house that day, and the post office Jeep flipped over on its side in front of my home. Literally flipped over on its side, because the street is not real flat and it's curved, so it makes that surface even smaller on the top for all these big cars. We've got CRVs. My husband and I were discussing it the other day. I think our roads were made for horse and buggy days, and now we've got some of the mirrors stick out like this from the cars I saw one the other day on a vehicle, was way out here, and when all these cars are trying to pass each other, especially like where they had all those pizza places and stuff by the post office and traffic coming out of there, and you've allowed parking really close to the corners, which used to be loading zones and stuff. These people can't pass each other, and it's like, I bring in my mirror now when I come down Cornell by the post office. I literally bring in my mirror so I don't get hit. And I actually, somebody did hit me about a week ago, going towards the plaza. Okay, so anyway, I am all for 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. I don't understand why Marin, it's now 2 lanes. The one lane in the middle, you can make turns. It used to be 2 lanes on both sides. Now you've got 2 lanes on there, so I think it should be included in this study. Also,
I'll ask you to finish up.
This law was passed that you could do this 10 and a half years ago. Okay, I had I think it was Department of Transportation, did a study for free when I was working on all this, and I had turned in my petition and all that. I think it was Department of Transportation, and there's a study that they did for Albany for free to discuss safety issues and stuff around the schools. I know for Cornell for sure, and I have a copy of this at my house. I didn't have time enough. I just found out about this meeting the other day. I went to the library tonight. It's no longer there. I'm sure you have it in your files. Nobody did anything that they recommended, and there was some good recommendations in that study. And maybe they would do another study for free, okay? And they were over there, I believe, in Richmond, where all those eucalyptus trees are. I think that's where the department was back then. Okay. So I arranged that. That could be looked at.
I'm going to ask you to finish it up.
Okay. Also, situations are changing. I agree that people letting their kids out and all that is a problem. The loading zones have never been enough. That was also in my petition to extend that and to look at that and to add more signage, which I got a couple of signs that say schools are here. But what's happening now, I heard the other day through a rumor, I don't know if it's true, they're going to tear down the old middle school, and half of that, those kids will probably be coming to Cornell and some other school. So you're going to increase.
You should talk with the school district about their plans. I'm going to.
So it's going to increase the traffic in these other schools. Okay.
Ma'am, we need to keep the meeting moving. You've used up more than your 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to step down.
So anyway, maybe the traffic, and also
ask you to step down now, ma'am.
You also refer to school zones on your paperwork, so we need to add the school zones, so that will be accurate. Thank you
for your comments. And we had another community member. Good evening.
Commissioners, I know you've had a lot of issues thrown at you tonight, and I don't know how you deal with all that, but I'm sure you can. My main thing is, I think the primary concern is the safety of our children. And we don't want a child hurt first, and then school zones is implemented down to 15 miles per hour. That is what you were asking. What is your main goal? The main goal is we don't want a child hurt. And then because of the child is hurt, then a new rule is implemented, and we lose a life over a child that's hurt. Now, I agree with Commissioner Justin.
Actually, he's a staff member.
Oh, sorry. I'm blind now. California law requires that an engineering study be conducted before lowering the speed limit. If the speed survey collision history, so there has to be an accident. I mean, a child's life is lost, basically. And road conditions identified in the engineering study do not still establish by ordinance or resolution a reduced school zone speed limit. The city, by ordinance, can still implement a reduced speed limit. So we don't want a child hurt, so we can implement the law, or a child killed. And that's what you were asking.
I was asking for the reason behind the desire for.
And that is the
Yes,
reason.
thank you. Ma'am, you had a chance to make a lot of comments.
I just want to say, my neighbor's car was hit and run the other day, and there was a police report on that, and my husband's truck window,
So you're saying there were additional accidents?
Yes.
I'm just putting that on the record for the,
I
yeah.
also have pictures from the past where.
Ma'am, perhaps we'll have another opportunity for you to bring that evidence. Thank you. So I'm going to bring it back to the commission now to respond to, voice some opinions about the potential for plans for school zones and the public comments and the staff comments. Who would like to start off?
I'd like to actually start by asking staff to elaborate on a comment in the memo, which is staff can evaluate the matter further as part of the school safety evaluation proposed for a future year. Can you tell me more about that evaluation and what it will encompass?
I'll take the first shot at it, and then Justin can fill in the blanks. School safety issues have come up in a variety of different contexts, most recently and most significantly with respect to the crossing guards and the investment of funds, whether it's, right now it's going to be city funds, but whether it's school district, UC, or whoever. We spend a lot of money on those crossing guards. And what as staff we've recommended is instead of continuing to expend those funds just kind of arbitrarily, let's do an analysis of where the safety issues are highest, the risks are greatest, and invest our funds to mitigate those risks. And so that can include both speeding, pick-up and drop-off, intersection improvements, of which we've done a lot. As you know, the commission has seen those projects over the years, pedestrian crossings, so on and so forth, and look at these schools comprehensively, and then decide how to invest the money and the resources to improve student safety. If I may, just one more point with respect to the safety surveys is our schools are changing. There will be a new campus for Ocean View. There'll be a new campus for Marin. There's a new middle school annex that's now under construction, which is going to be an elementary school for a few years. And then there's going to be a couple of new buildings in the heart of the high school, which will also be an elementary school for a couple of years. So there's all those campuses are going to see changes in their pickup and drop off as a result of this sequence of projects over the next, I don't know, what is it, 5 years or something like that. So again, we're just trying to take a high level comprehensive look at it before we pick out solutions.
And is it fair to assume that that study will include evaluation of how vehicles are stopping to drop off and pick up students, where they're doing that, whether they're blocking each other, blocking traffic, whether there's adequate white zones for people to do that in a safer manner, whether kids are running across the street mid-block because they're dropped off on the wrong side, all of that comes into play as part of that study.
And I think the safety issue that we feel probably the greatest concern is the one you just mentioned, the students being dropped off mid-block on the wrong side of the street. They race across the street, and drivers don't expect them. The kids, they're often coming between parked cars. You know what the risks are with that. And so a good pickup and drop-off zone is the start of a really good, safe school campus.
To piggyback on Harry's question, will you do an evaluation of speed as well around the schools? And is that a labor-intensive thing or not? I don't know if you use a radar gun or the...
Yeah, I mean, we haven't scoped this out, and when we start in on this in detail, you'll see that scope of work, and the commission will be part of the process. But yeah, I would expect that we would do, using the technology we have now, do speed and volume counts at various locations at all the schools so that we know what we're dealing with.
And when we do the speed evaluation, can we be specific about measuring speeds during the drop-off time in the morning and measuring speeds during the pickup time in the afternoon as opposed to just a 24-hour average of.
As you know, the data is in there somehow, and if you can help us get it out, that would be great. But yeah, the technology is very specific. If we run the right report, we can give that to you.
So I noted or it's noted in the staff report that we haven't seen incidences at the areas where you are able to potentially reduce the speed adjacent to schools. But there was a comment about Marin, and Marin is probably one of the biggest concerns for speeding vehicles adjacent to a school. Do you think that that's something that could be looked at further, or is it the fact that it's a 3-lane roadway that you think it doesn't qualify?
I believe it doesn't, but we can look at it further as we start the broader evaluation we discussed. I mean, we can look where other cities have put it in place and see if anyone's made a different interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a really good piece of information to have.
Yeah.
My impression when I look at the black lines on this map is that my gut feeling, not based on data, is that most likely during school drop-off and pickup times, speeds on those black segments are probably very low. Very low, like maybe between 0 and 10 a lot of the time. That would be my best guess. Unfortunately, we don't have the data. Nobody here has really begun to gather any kind of data. We don't have data from the city. Another thing we don't have is comments from anybody with a kid in school. Just general observations about.
You don't qualify?
Comments from the public.
Right.
I'm
The members of this commission all have children in Albany schools.
Yeah.
So I think we are also sources of information.
So speaking as a parent who's had a kid at Cornell and middle school, my impression is that the big problem with safety at drop-off and pickup is lack of loading zones and children entering and exiting cars in inappropriate places, whether that's because they're on the wrong side of the street or because the car is in the middle of the street and hasn't had a chance to pull over. I'm not personally aware of speed ever being a problem. I'm sure there's fast-moving cars on Marin and Solano and Buchanan during school drop-off and pickup hours, and maybe it's because of the access path that I use, but I've never found that speed to be a particular source of hazard. So I think it's really important to do the big picture evaluation that Jeff is talking about and look at and speak to the actual constituents, parents, school staff, gather data, figure out what the biggest safety hazards are, and then come up with a plan that addresses those hazards. Taking action right now to reduce speed limits to 15 on certain blocks where it may, in fact, already be much lower than that in practice seems to me like a misguided effort. And also many of the anecdotal incidents that we've heard about with problems with speeding on Cornell and other places in the city don't actually have to do with school drop-off and pickup times. They have to do with things like dogs, parked cars, people pulling in and out of driveways,
Pizza delivery.
colliding with other vehicles. Those are problems all over the city, and I'm sure that many people would like to have slower traffic on their block, but we can only do this in places where it's actually relevant to protecting the safety of school children, and we need more information before we know if any of these black stripes fall into that category. That would be my impression from what we've heard so far.
So I've been involved in Safe Routes to Schools for 10 years as a parent champion at Marin School for 8 years or 7 or 8 years, and then at the middle school for more than 3 years. And I've also been involved with Safe Routes to Schools at the high school. I've been involved with a number of walking audits that have been done with state grant funds and through the Safe Routes to School program. In those walking audits, there have been speed issues that have been identified. Those have, in my remembrance, have been mostly around intersections. There have been areas where there were stretches of road that had specific speed issues, and I'm thinking specifically of Santa Fe Avenue along Marin School. And in that case, speed surveys were done. They justified, as part of the project, along with a project, having speed humps put in to reduce speed in a long stretch where families were crossing the street because there isn't a crosswalk. In my experience and looking at the data and being involved in these evaluations, I don't see a strong mesh between the areas of problem, speed problems, and areas where we can actually implement school zones based on this map. It's just not a good overlap. And we talked a little bit about that and looking at Marin Avenue. There's just not a strong convergence of improvement that I see here. In my many years of observing the pickup and drop-off times at schools, the speeds have been quite low, especially in the morning. We have a situation of gridlock on many of these roads during the pickup and drop-off times. And that's been my experience at Marin and the middle school and somewhat with the high school. I have not traveled in many years to the Cornell school area during pickup and drop-off or the other schools, so I can't speak to that. As far as school zones go, we have evidence that we can only put them in certain places. We had some firsthand experience shared with this commission from our commissioner who works in Berkeley, where they did implement a lot of school zones, and they found that school zones were only as good as the enforcement associated with them. To get a change in behavior, you also have to back that up with enforcement. So to me, that says that just putting up signs is not going to get the kind of reduction in speed or a change in behavior that we're looking for. And I think we would be better served by a more complete analysis of where we put our resources before we jump into something like creating school zones. So I'm in favor of looking at the whole package.
I wanted to follow up on the ideas about enforcement that you brought up. I think we do have a lot of problems that could be helped through enforcement. And again, I don't think they're mostly around speed. I think they're mostly around where people decide to stop their vehicles. And one that comes to mind that I didn't mention before is the red zones that have been added in many cases right near intersections. A lot of people are now using those as waiting zones, at least at the middle school. So we have people driving into a place right next to a crosswalk and stopping their car and waiting there because they don't have a loading zone available and parking is crowded. And if there was going to be enforcement, I think it would be useful to try to prevent that behavior because that really makes it unsafe for people to use the crosswalks. My gut feeling is that if we put more officers on the grounds during drop-off and pickup times, they could find a lot of infractions to cite, and speeding would probably not be very high on the list.
Yeah, you're asking, you haven't seen Cornell in a while. That's my observation of Cornell when my kids are crossing Solano to get to the school. It's chaotic, right? There's a huge amount of cars, there's a lot of congestion, there's a lot of different activities going on, different movements, whether it's bike, ped, or car, or bus. But because it's so chaotic, it's not the situation where you have high speed. If you get rid of the crossing guards, I think that's a different situation altogether. I think the crossing guards do mitigate that issue, at least at Solano. But yeah, it's not fast moving by any means at that location during school time. But it is chaotic, and there is bad behavior of where cars are loading and unloading, cars maybe not yielding to pedestrians at the right times, those types of things. But yeah, I haven't seen speed at that location at least.
Do we have a consensus to put this issue off until a more general study of safety around the schools?
Yeah, provided that
It's on the calendar?
we do speed evaluation, I think is something we should add to that scope of work for the evaluation of the schools.
Harry, are you comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll give that feedback back to staff.
Thank you very much. We'll keep
Thank
you
you.
posted as we develop the study methodology and scope of work and so forth later this year.
All right, so stay tuned, and it will come up again on the schedule. Do you have a schedule question?
Am I right that this is only enforceable during school hours, or is it all the time?
So, ma'am, you asked about when it's enforceable, and I'm repeating that for the recording. And we didn't explore that tonight, so I don't have any information on that, and we would look at that later.
Like at 3 o'clock after school's out, is it still, if we did pass it for 50, would it still be enforceable after school's no longer going? But we have other programs happening at the school besides school. That's,
I bet that you can enforce it as you post it. So that's something we could look at as we look at implementing them.
the one benefit of it would
Ma'am, we do ask usually that you hold your comments.
be at a lower.
Ma'am, I'm talking to you. We ask you to hold your comments to the scheduled portions of the meeting, and you have had a chance to give comments. So thank you very much. If you'd like to write us some more information, you're welcome to do that.
I definitely have experience because I live in this situation.
And you are a prime source of information. Thank you. So we're going to move on to keep the meeting moving. And we're going to go to item number 6.4. It's the Street Resurfacing Project.
Yes, thank you. This is the 2018 Street Resurfacing Project. This project has several elements. Typically, when we do a resurfacing project, we don't necessarily bring it to traffic and safety, but there are a number of elements that fall under your purview, including 2 ADA ramps that we're modifying, as well as some striping elements that were previously looked at by the council in 2014. The ATP striping was adopted by council, and we're incorporating many of those improvements into this design package. So I'll go through it. Before I start with the design package, I put a graph up here for you guys to look at. This is a typical pavement life cycle. I don't know if you guys have seen this type of diagram before, but it's essentially an S-curve that shows that for the first half to 2/3 of the life cycle of a typical paved street, you're going to get a good amount of durability out of that street and a fairly predictable slow degradation. And then after that period, you can see where there's an inflection and drops down very quickly, where you get an increased speed of degradation until you get to the bottom. Along with that, you can see that the slurry seal is a recommended typical pavement application for that first half of a street's life, and then it gets progressively more aggressive and more expensive as you move down that curve. City of Albany has a number of streets in all of those categories. You've driven the streets, so you're familiar with streets that are mildly degraded and severely degraded. As you know, the council adopted the CIP in March of this year, and staff was quite anxious to get moving and do some surface restorations this summer. So our strategy was to really focus on that top part of the curve. For this design package in front of you, it's exclusively slurry seal, so that the investment that in prior years that we did make in those nice streets, we're rehabilitating many of those. We have not forgotten about the streets that are further degraded. Those will actually be in the next design package. So we're concentrating on the slurry seals, which gives us some scale value. We anticipate that the contractors who are going to be approaching this design package will specialize in slurry seals. They only have to mobilize equipment that is specialized in slurry seals, so that we should get a good value for the city's dollar on that effort. Next year, we'll focus more closely on the more degraded parts of the city. I know that this council commission has given us feedback on specific areas of the city. We've incorporated those, and we're ready to go on the next design package, but I'll walk you through this one. This is a nice, beautiful, color-coded version of our surface project. This includes in blue oh, thank you.
Can you blow that up just a little bit so that we see the map portion larger?
Justin's going to give it a try right now.
Thank you. That's better.
Very nice.
That works.
It's great.
So the areas in blue will have slurry seals, street improvements, as well as some striping, ATP striping. Honestly, I can't read this. I'm going to sneak over to Justin's computer. Oh, shall I? There we go. Good? Turn that on. The green areas, such as Spokane and parts of Talbot, are going to have ATP striping and signage put in. Again, these are all according to the 2014 ATP plan. The red areas will just have signage only, and the yellow areas will have surface seals and stripage and signage. So we've got a lot of mix for the contractor to focus on, but it provides a lot of benefits. In the drawing package, what you'll find is that NCE was our consultant that specializes in surface restoration. So they put together a group of tables. Let me see if I can show this. They put together a group of tables that specifically look at slurry sealing. So to summarize that, we're resurfacing 16 streets. We've got base repairs that accumulate to 23,800 square feet of base repairs, and that's the area of essentially base rock below the AC pavement. We've got surface treatments, like I said, slurry seals are 78,000, and rubberized cape seal is about 5,000 square feet. Striping and signage, in addition to the 16 streets, on top of that is 12 dedicated streets just for striping and signage. Those 12 streets are on a separate group of sheets, and Fair and Pierce did that design for the city 2 years ago, so we're incorporating those sheets into our design package. That was already done, and we're essentially putting that into our completed design package. Concrete repairs, those are curbs and gutters. So as we were walking these streets and assessing the condition of the pavement, we noted that there were areas of curb and gutters that also needed repairs. Those are identified in boxes. They're not really shown on the streets, but that's another area that we can essentially do some improvements while we're on that street. City staff, public works staff, does those types of repairs, but after they get to a certain scale, it becomes very difficult for city staff to keep up with a lot of those repairs. So where it's in 50 feet or larger, those are areas we'll take those on and incorporate those and have a contractor do it. The engineer's estimate for this project is $950,000 for some, that's fine. Just to give you guys some perspective, we've already done some pavement already in the city. I think we've brought this to the commission before. $167,000 was invested in Marin as part of that resurfacing project between San Pablo and, I believe, Cornell. So that those first couple blocks of Marin, that's 167,000. For the first 2 years of the CIP, we invested about a total of about $5 million on resurfacing total. So this is $950,000. We'll have a remainder of about $1.6 million to invest for the kind of the more degraded portions of the streets for the next design package. So we're focusing on part of that investment on the slurry seals, and the next part of the investment will be on the next design package. Along with this, I did mention the two ADA ramps. Those are going to be both at Solano and Keynes. So that intersection already has ADA curbs, but they're out of compliance with the domes. So we'll correct that. This is an example of one of the 4 vicinity maps to show you some of the detail that we asked the contractors to go through. So vicinity map 1 shows kind of the northwestern portion of the city. The long street on the left-hand side is Pierce. And then you've got some areas that are just along the Albany Hill area. So the top area is street treatments. We give the contractor estimated areas and the specific slurry treatment. We give them volumes of base repair, areas of base repair for both areas that need 6-inch repair and 4-inch repair. So there's a lot of detail here that essentially the contractor can take and give us a very precise quality estimate for us to do the street improvements. On top of that, you'll see on those vicinity map pages at the very bottom, we have called out the striping and signage details for each of those streets. So on your screen, I put up 3 different types of crosswalk designs. And if you look closely enough, you'll see 4 different types of crosswalk designs. The one on the left is a typical low-volume residential street. We call this a basic crosswalk. It's 2 white striped lines. Many of the areas that are outside of a designated pedestrian walkway or a bicycle path typically get a low-volume street crosswalk design, such as this. The 2 right photographs are newly painted on Marin. One is a typical ladder design, and the other one is, I believe, what they call a continental design, preferably on high-volume cycle bicycle paths. So we've got all 3 of these in the design. Primarily, the ones on the left are the basics, and most of the streets that we're identifying are basic designs, and then we've got some on the that are continental. So I'll bring up this element here. This is Pierce Street. So from Cerrito Creek, following all the way past the park and into the Washington Avenue, we've got 3 crosswalks shown here and some significant signage and striping. So we've got signage and striping on this street that calls it out for share rows, as well as, I believe these are elevated crosswalks. So these are shown here as ladder crosswalks. I recommend, we're having NCE change that to the continental crosswalks. But this is an example of a street that really isn't called to be paved immediately, but we're gonna put in the striping and signage. And this is the second half of Pierce that goes all the way to Buchanan. So there's going to be a lot more signage here that shows it as a bikeway, as well as some wayfinding signs to indicate kind of where you are in the city.
Can I ask a question specific to Pierce? I think some of those are supposed to be raised crosswalks, and they're not raised anymore, right? They've been pretty much flattened out, I think. I thought that's on Pierce.
They were always fairly flat. It's a bus route.
But I think they're even flatter than they were supposed to be.
Could be.
I think they've lost their character of being raised, and I don't know if that's something that you guys would look at in this project, but I'm pretty sure that that's the case. I thought it was on Pierce where I saw this.
So it would be in front of the condos?
Yeah, that it was supposed to be a slightly raised crosswalk, probably 3 inches higher than the roadway, and I think that's all just been it's like concave now, I believe. So I don't know if that's
I believe the designs that we have that were adopted by council have them as raised crosswalks. I'll confirm that. I'll double check that.
That's great.
And given that it is
Bus route.
a bus route, there's probably a height limitation on that.
Yeah.
We can make them more visible.
Really wide, and I think 3 inches high, I thought it was, but.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're sunken. Now it might qualify as a dip. It could be an improvement.
Yeah.
You know, but if they're not effective, then yeah, that's something that should be looked at.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not at that point yet, but keep going, please.
Thank you for the question. And then the last section of the drawings that you have in front of me are 2 pages of tables that call out specifically several signs that were also designed as part of the ATP study. So I counted these up. There are 66 signs across all of these streets. 43 of them, 19 of them are detail, the top detail where it calls it out as a bike boulevard, and the lower detail, the bike routes, is called out in 47 different places. So these, some good news and some bad news on this one, just to call your attention to it. The lower one is kind of a typical bike route signage. So that's going to be included in the design for the construction package. The upper one is borrowed from Berkeley. So I think this was put in as a placeholder during the original design effort, and it was never looked at specifically for Albany. It doesn't have any Albany specific fonting or anything like that. So the wording is Albany specific, but if we want to make any changes to the fonts, that may end up coming in at the latter part of the project. It's not a big deal because relative to the size of the project, this is going to be a small element. This will just come in, it'll arrive just in time as we get a design for that sign kind of laid out. We're looking for this body to provide us feedback. We're at the 90% stage. I'll admit that you guys haven't seen this prior to this. When I started the project, it was resurfacing only, so I wasn't thinking in terms of coming to traffic and safety. When we added the ADA ramps and the ATP striping, that kind of rang the alarm bells for me to come to this body first. If there aren't any substantial comments, we certainly can go to council and ask for approval to advertise, approval to bid this out. But we can come back and answer as many questions as you guys might have.
Are there any questions from commission? Harry?
So as you added the signage and striping elements to this plan, are all of them elements that we've already looked at and approved in the ATP in past traffic and safety meetings, or is there anything new here that we should concentrate on?
So there's nothing new. We didn't add any elements to the 2014 plans. The only thing that we had to do was we had to push out a couple streets such as Kane and Santa Fe that have other construction conflicts with them. So if we're going to do any sort of sewer rehab, the city of Berkeley is doing some work within our city that is going to impact that work. So we didn't want to put in striping this year and then have it impacted. So those
Right,
reductive changes.
I'm just asking about the designs.
Fair enough.
Because there are many pages of detailed designs here that I don't think any of us have had a chance to look at yet. And I know there are some people in the city, not necessarily on the Traffic and Safety Commission, who are likely to study this document very carefully. Is this whole document online now? Because I didn't.
So we'll include it as part of the minutes. I think that's
the minutes. Okay.
It's not online now because it's not out to bid. It's still a draft set, but I think as a draft, we can include it as part of the minutes.
Okay. It's just that there's certain very detail-oriented eyes that should study this and make sure that the elements that are included are done in the best possible way. But if those elements are exactly what's already been approved in prior Traffic and Safety Commission meetings, then I'm more confident that they're fine, and I understand that we're incorporating some of those elements into this project and not all of them. But if there's any elements that are new or different from what we've approved before, that's where I'd really want to focus our attention. So,
Let's see what comes up as part of the discussion and address that at the end of the issue.
okay.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yeah, I had the same question also, but a couple of other questions. Does the slurry seal actually lengthen your S-curve that you showed earlier, or does it still maintain that S-curve?
The slurry seal essentially restarts the S-curve. So you essentially go back up, so you're in the 90 to 100 range of PCI, of pavement condition index.
Okay, good.
There's that dip again. The line just goes back up.
Yeah.
It restarts.
Right.
Year zero after a
Shifts over,
slurry seal.
goes back up.
The challenge to, I guess,
you get a
maybe
speed hump.
And there you go.
maybe to add to that, if you do have any underlying base issues that you don't address, then those will surface, so to speak, again more quickly because they're already existing.
Do you know if any of those exist in the locations that you are doing slurry seal?
Yeah, NCE, who is our design consultant, did a significant effort of going out and identifying where there were base failures. If you walk around the city or if you drive around, you'll see these white rectangular markings that look like, oh, somebody's actually identified the problem. So that was NCE going out and looking at that, and then our staff went out and actually did a few concrete borings, or not concrete borings, pavement borings, where you can take out a chunk and measure how much base repair has failed and how much is still there.
And that would be addressed in the future
Some of those where we're showing recommendations on the map, we identified base repairs that will be restored as part of this project. So they do what they call a dig out. So they'll take a section of that pavement, dig out all the AC pavement, restore the base rock, and then do an AC overlay over the top of that. So it'll be a slurry seal plus base repair on those streets. So that was kind of this table where I showed the base repair as 23,000 square feet. Those are essentially potholes.
Okay. A few other questions. Funding source, is this county money, state money, Measure B?
This is a combination. I don't have the CIP in front of me, so this is a combination of Measure B and local funding.
Okay. Yeah. So not gas tax money or anything like that?
I can double check that and get back to the commission on that. Gas tax money is generally split between streets and storm drains, but I'd have to go back and look.
Okay. The wayfinding signs, I noticed them, I think, on the Ohlone Greenway for El Cerrito. And I think those ones include AC transit or bus transit wayfinding. That'd be great if we could look at that as well for the Albany signs.
Staff has been discussing that. It was not included in the 2014 scope of work.
Okay.
The Greenway wasn't, but
Correct.
there may be AC transit references like
On
the
wayfinding transit signs in general.
Right. Yeah, AC transit, there probably is. I know there's BART references, and we can double check to see if there's AC transit references on the street wayfinding signs.
Great. And then my last question is on outreach. Is that just going to be the responsibility of the contractor, or are we doing anything in advance of that? Or are the neighbors aware that this is coming?
The neighbors are not yet aware because it hasn't been out to bid yet. So typically what we'll do is after it's advertised and we have what we think are viable bids we're going to go forward with, we'll recommend that to award, and at that time we typically send out a letter, like maybe a postcard or something, one page, to all the affected residents, and that comes under the city's signature, usually with my phone number on it. And then we do what we call a 72-hour notice. So while the contractor is out on a specific street, the contractor is required to do a 72-hour notice prior to doing any work on that street. So they'll get two notices. One at the very beginning of the project, everybody is notified, then everybody forgets, and then 72 hours before they're on your street, we give them another notice. So the first one is coming from us, and we may introduce the name of the contractor. The second one will be from the contractor.
Okay, great. And what type of disruption are we expecting, say for the worst case scenario where you have base repairs? how many days or what type of traffic control? Are you going to have to close down streets or anything like that as a result of this?
Yeah, for a slurry seal, you typically want a clean street. So you want all the cars out, and it's a one-day operation to go from intersection to intersection.
Okay.
When you leave for work, you have to move your cars. When you get back, generally the street is reopened.
Mm-hmm.
For base repairs, they'll probably have a first early crew where they're actually doing a dig out. So that might be in front of one or two properties. It may block one or two driveways.
Mm-hmm.
So that depends on the size of the pothole. Those will be done first by like kind of a mobilized crew, and then after all of those are done, or I guess maybe in front of the slurry seal group, they'll have the base repairs repaired. So the base repairs will essentially be a one-day operation in front of particular properties, and then
Those would be one day as well. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a big project.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions at this time. I'd like to turn it over to public comment if we've exhausted our questions up here.
Yeah.
Hi. Still Amy Smolin. So thanks for improving the signage and the markings. I love the Berkeley fonts, great, the Berkeley colors, continuity, we're bordered by them on two sides, so it'd be nice if it looks the same. Question, what are you doing on Adams? What's exactly going to be done on Adams Street?
Adams Street was identified in the 2014 ATP as a bike boulevard. I think staff has been looking at that as whether that's a viable alternative for that street or not.
Well, it was actually, Adams and Canes are supposed to be bike boulevards. That was passed by this body and by city council. So when you're doing the changes, I guess you should do the changes that are going to be final, which is internal two ways. Just don't stripe it twice, in other words. There's going to be some changes made. So let's make them once. And maybe you can add Canes to it, since the project is the same. It's making parallel bike boulevards, parallel to San Pablo. All right, that would be good not to do them twice. The other question is, I just want to confirm, are you really not repaving Washington? Because, Washington is a bike boulevard, and it is literally, seriously, the worst road surface in all of Albany. It's a bike boulevard, and there are sharrows, and I finally found pictures on my phone. And it's completely pitted, rutted from Key Route on west, which also crosses the Ohlone Greenway. It's really unrideable. It's absolutely horrible. When I'm coming off the Greenway and going to Key Route, I'll literally ride on the sidewalk. It's terrible. So really, please repave that. I can show you a couple of pictures on my phone. It's just holed and pitted and rutted. And
Amy, that was addressed at a recent Traffic and Safety Commission meeting when.
As I see, it looks like there's nothing on that chart.
Fair enough. So you are not the first to provide this comment. We've heard this comment from the commission. I mentioned that there were essentially two phases to this project. The first page will simply be the slurry seals. And because we are further down on this curve behind you, we're way down where it calls for a mill and thick overlay. We're going to be focusing on Washington in the next design package. So Washington, all of the critical intersections, and Masonic, those 2 blocks of Masonic between Washington and Solano, I believe, or Portland and Solano, those will also be focused in on the next design package. So we're not forgetting about it. Because we only had 3 months to get this design package out before council goes on summer break, we wanted to get some surface improvements done this summer. So that's why we hurried up to get this slurry seal package together. Slurry seals are actually a very fast package to get through design relative to something as significant as Masonic. We want to make sure we do Washington and Masonic correctly. So I'm not delaying anything. We're doing this as fast as possible.
Okay, because it's literally the worst road in the entire town. Seriously, it really is. So.
And we have commitment from the Director of Public Works that Washington will get its due.
Okay.
If we put it in the slurry seal, we would be doing it twice or more
Okay.
So
Okay.
it does not
I
make
just
sense
saw
to
that
include
it
it.
was not on this list, so that's all I knew. Okay.
enough.
All right, thank you. You're on tape, or on not tape, on.
And Mark Hurley is on tape previously, so
Correct.
we're
Jeremy,
covered.
You got that?
We're covered, yeah. Thank you. Bring it back to the commission. Besides the timing and the amount of information, are there other comments? Then let's address that. This is a lot of information to receive at a commission meeting. And yes, a lot of this is fairly straightforward. There are a number of details. Yes, obviously the striping and signage comes directly from the ATP, which is now a somewhat aged document. I guess my question is, when were you intending to take this to City Council?
Staff is flexible at this point. We can certainly put this on the website for further public review. We can come back to this body next month for additional discussion, for additional review of the design.
I don't want to delay this project if we can help it. We're losing good weather. I'd love to get you, have the opportunity to get the best bids possible, all of that.
My goal, to answer your question, my
Yeah,
goal
please.
was to actually advertise prior to the August recess so that we could be in advertisement in August and then have bids ready for council approval in September.
But you need council approval to advertise.
Which would be in July.
Right, and our next commission meeting isn't until towards the end of July.
Right.
So,
We would delay that. We would push it off. We would push off advertising if the body or the public needs that.
yeah. I guess what I would propose is to give us a little more time with this. Maybe there's like a 2-week window where we could have members of the public, put it up on the website, have members of the public and the commission have time to review this information, and then perhaps come back to staff. And if there are major issues that come up, that could then come back to traffic and safety. And if they don't, then it could move on to the city council without further delay.
Staff's open to that.
Yeah, Jeff, do you think that's
And
workable?
I agree with Robert, and in addition, for the people, the detail-oriented people who might have some questions or want to discuss it, we could make ourselves available to them. And, if particularly answering questions that may make some of their concerns go away or allow us to make some modifications to it so that, if they're relatively minor things. I think Amy made a good point about the Adams Street. We got to think through that. We can deal with that.
Yeah,
And so
I would think so.
I think we can work out and get it to the people. We all know who's.
Well, I'd like to look at it too.
You were one of them. I was.
And we do appreciate you bringing it, and we don't want to hold up the process, but at the same time, it'd be good to be able to take a look at it.
So it sounds like we have a plan where
Yeah.
we can show it to a few people. If there are no stumbling blocks, then you can move ahead with your accelerated schedule that you were hoping for. And if there are more serious questions that the commission needs to address, then we'd slow it down.
And maybe it's maybe one element of the project, like the signage that
Right.
could be separate from the rest of the timeline. So we could explore that offline. And you're not actually looking for an approval from us tonight. You're just giving this to us for information.
Correct.
So I think if, Robert, you amenable to that?
Yeah. My question was, at 90% completion, what can things still be done at this point without incurring additional costs for the designer? I mean, it's pretty late in the game.
Yeah, my anticipation is the bulk of this project is in the resurfacing elements. the
Right.
slurry
It should be
seal,
straightforward.
Square footages, volumes of base rock, things of that nature. So if the large amount of comments are about making sure the striping is correct and making sure we pick the right elements for pedestrians or our cyclists, Those are elements that can change, and it's a matter of either
Okay.
adding a sheet or taking off
Yeah.
line items. I don't see those as big changes.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get any pavement engineers who are going to review this.
Well, it's actually hard to.
Maybe striping.
It's hard to evaluate the pavement as a non-engineer without all the data. We don't know what streets
Right.
in total that you're looking at doing more in-depth
Right.
reconstruction. So at this point, it's hard to compare and contrast anyway. I think my focus would be, the sort of the striping and signage and making sure that things that were done a few years ago still make sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So if the rest of the commission is okay with that, I think we'll leave it there, except should we designate a deadline?
Yeah, I think so. Today's the 28th. We have a holiday between now and mid-July, but July 9th or 10th, I believe, is a couple weeks away.
Well, the 10th, I think, is a week from Monday.
13th would be a Friday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks from today is Thursday the 12th.
So, and you have a half day on Friday. So if we say noon on Friday.
I don't have a half day on Friday. I work for
I'm sorry, the city offices generally aren't open.
I'll answer your questions on the second half of the 13th. But we do have a commission meeting on the 16th, so that's a logical, thank you, council meeting on the 16th.
Council meeting on the 16th.
Yes, so that's a nice stopping point for questions.
Okay, so let's make it noon on the 13th. And you said you were going to put the plans up on the website. Would those be on tonight's agenda, or how would you identify those?
I think, we'll revise the agenda as it's posted on the webpage and add this to this particular agenda item. So a person can look at this agenda, and we can also send the commission links to it if that's helpful, that you can forward on.
Yeah. And the presentation as well. Sure. That would be great, because there's some great information there. And the color-coded chart is really informative, and I don't think that's in the package. And then we could blow it up for ourselves. And Great. That sounds like a great compromise. Thanks for bringing this material to us.
Thank you.
With that, we're ending our item 6 and moving on to item 7, announcements and communications. Let's start with the Central Avenue Undercrossing Project summary.
So this is a new project, but the slides will give you some context on how it relates to a couple other projects. This is from a workshop that Caltrans put on in advance. They are planning on submitting this project for the Active Transportation Program, state grant program. So they are focused on the undercrossing. This is at Central, just north of Albany. Here Street comes up right east of here. This would be looking at a two-way cycle track on the south side and an increased one-way and sidewalk on the north side. They see this fitting in with the Phase 1 and Phase 2, that is Richmond and Contra Costa County-led project. Phase 1 of which is already being implemented now, which includes some green conflict zone bike lanes west of the freeway. The second phase of that project, which is still in design, I believe, would be looking at more dramatic changes, highlighted here briefly. I'll go into a little more detail on that in a couple slides. There's also connections with what's in El Cerrito's plans, and this is part of an improved connection between the BART station and the Bay Trail. So they see this as one of the main gaps between some of these other projects that are on the books. This is currently looking east with at the freeway undercrossing with diagrams of what's being put in place as part of Phase 1 with some head access improvements and green striping. The Phase 2 is actually going to look at moving the existing stoplight at Pierce and Central, 1 block east, and would be putting in a new roadway connection that's currently public storage to direct traffic off of Pierce to the right and up at the parallel street. The idea here, better separating the off-ramp signal from which is just off the map here. Currently, there's 2 signals very close together. If you're familiar with the intersection, causes a lot of problems because they're not well synchronized. This would allow better spacing between those 2 signals and improve the operations of that whole intersection.
So Justin, would it also then relieve some of the traffic volume at some of the movements at Central and Pierce by making those left turns all early, well, block earlier? Is that
right? So the component of this that's not very visible is that Pierce would then become right turn in and right turn out only. So you would not be making the westbound left turn onto Pierce or a left turn off of Pierce. So people coming north on Pierce, if they wanted to make the left, would have to go on the parallel street.
so almost like a jug handle and then get to the freeway that way? Okay.
So queuing would not sort of impede the intersections is the idea. You'd have a better spacing between the 2. So we can talk about this in the future agenda items. We can invite, if you want to get into more detail on this particular phase, this is not the project that Caltrans is proposing. This is a separate project. We can invite them and see if they'll come present to this body if you want to dive into this project a little more in detail. They're highlighting, as I mentioned, the connections to El Cerrito's plan and improvements that are on the books in El Cerrito between the BART station and getting through here. The idea that if you had improved connections on the south side of the shopping center and the Creek Trail, it would come out on Pierce. You could have an improved cycle track on the west side of Pierce that would then meet up with the improvements that Caltrans is proposing on the undercrossing. They highlighted the existing conditions as they currently are and are proposing a 2-way cycle track that would follow that BART to Bay Trail connection on the south side, but would also acknowledge that there is some traffic that wouldn't be coming from that direction and that there would be westbound traffic maybe coming down Central and still benefit from improvements at the undercrossing. So there is also a westbound cycle track on the north side included in their initial concept, but they were doing workshops proposing this and soliciting feedback there pretty early in the, they're not yet actually designing this. This is more just proposing the elements and the layout of what they would be looking at. So the elements they're talking about are separating the sidewalk and the bikeway, the fencing under the undercrossing, lighting, improved railing, separating with the vehicle traffic side, and striping and visibility at the intersection crossings of the on and off ramps. And this is, their initial sketch of what that looks like with the 2-way cycle track I mentioned on the south side, a westbound 1-way on the north side. That would connect with that bikeway proposed on Pierce Street that would connect to the Creek Trail then. So that was the information on the proposal. They were doing community meetings in El Cerrito and Richmond in advance of submitting a proposal to the Active Transportation Program. This is the first time that Caltrans is able to submit as an entity. So this is the regional district. They just did a bike plan for this Caltrans district. This was highlighted as one of a priority within that plan. I think it benefits. It's at jurisdictional boundaries and can benefit from Caltrans taking a look at this. So that's just an update for you all on what's being proposed just to the north of us.
So to the other project, the bypass, it sounds like probably a good solution to figuring out that intersection, at least from an automobile standpoint. But it also seems like it would affect the condos and apartments that are in Albany. So we should ensure that some outreach is made to those folks. Like I said, I think it's positive, so people won't be coming out in pitchforks or anything like that. But for them to know that that's changing would be a good thing.
Harry, did you? So the last slide specifically says that, well, okay, go back one, maybe not the exact last slide. Okay, let me be more specific, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, the last slide with the pink on it, yeah. So the pink trail here is identified as a planned bikeway on Pierce Street to connect to BART and the Bay Trail. And then if we go back to the slide you were just on with, I'm sorry, I have trouble scrolling. Not only do I need a new power supply, I need a new computer. There it is. Yes, the local planning efforts. So it appears that they're identifying their connection to BART along Cerrito Creek. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they actually identify the existing narrow pedestrian path along Cerrito Creek. And there's no cross San Pablo connection there either.
So, yeah, I can.
It's not depicted in this map.
Is
Yeah.
there. It's not depicted. They're pulling from El Cerrito's plan, but El Cerrito does divert off of, after you get through the shopping center, they put you onto a parallel street to the north in their bike route. That puts you onto Carlson.
Okay.
And get you across, which I believe is the bike route versus the very
Yeah.
narrow.
And it shows at the bottom, yeah.
Versus
Okay.
the very narrow crossing, yeah, as you mentioned, just north of the creek, it does get very narrow and works for a pedestrian, but is much harder for a cyclist.
Okay. And yeah, I'm not attacking a plan that I think that you planned. Thank you for bringing this information. Okay. Any other questions? Public comment?
Sure. I think I will. But on the
Surprise,
other
surprise.
hand, still Amy Smolens, how awesome would it be to now, since you're creating a connection, or they will be creating a connection to that wonderful little Cerrito Creek path, to have the little bridge, the pedestrian bike bridge. My God, that'd be wonderful. Then we could ride and walk to, from West Albany to the Bay. That'd be so great. One question. I can't really tell, or maybe, I don't know if they discussed having a level change, but on the, where there's the two-way cycle track and the sidewalk, having a level change. Like, you know how on the Berkeley Bike Bridge, they have a little level change, so the sidewalk is a little higher, and it really works great. Pedestrians don't meander into the bike lane, and cyclists don't meander into the pedestrian lane. And since this is, a lot of it's from scratch anyway, that would seem like something that would be doable and would make it practically safer for everybody.
I think that is visible on the last slide, the one with
Is
the
it?
purple.
Is it? I can't
At the
tell if
bottom,
it's higher.
there's a
You think it's,
review. Yeah, at the very, yeah.
looking?
The bottom of the page.
There's a level difference between the cyclists and the pedestrians.
Okay, wow.
It's subtle, yeah.
Okay. There you go. All right. Thank you.
Other public comment on the Central Avenue Interstate 80 undercrossing and improvements project? Seeing none, bring it back to commission. Comments, opinions, questions? I guess my question is, well, first of all, again, thank you for bringing this. The last slides, including this one, are concept plan. You know, other slides don't show the cycle track on Pierce Street. How much of that is solidly in the planning, and how much might we need to advocate for?
That is a question for El Cerrito. I don't know. It's in their plan, but I don't know if that has progressed from the plan.
Okay.
The Caltrans project is just within the Caltrans right-of-way, the undercrossing and the on and off ramp crossings.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing. And the crossings?
The crossings at the on and off ramps, the intersection crossings.
Yeah, it's a little confusing, that area with Richmond and El Cerrito, and it's great they're all working together. I guess I'd be interested in interfacing with a similar body in El Cerrito, or asking El Cerrito staff to come and talk to us about what their plans might be, and you know, supporting connecting to the trail system and bike facilities in Albany.
And I was just, because public comment was getting into details, there is a Caltrans page for this project, and they are soliciting feedback. I can probably pull that up or pass that along if folks want to submit comments directly to Caltrans.
Great. Anything else for the commission? All right. Thank you. So we're moving on to item 7.2, school crossing guard program update.
Yes, this is, I think, a brief update for you, just to close the loop. A few months ago, you took quite a bit of public testimony regarding the school crossing guard program. The City Council discussed it at several meetings, and on June 4th, approved a motion to authorize the police chief and the city manager to negotiate with a consulting firm called All City Management, excuse me, not a consulting firm, a professional services firm called All City Management Services, that provides crossing guard services to a variety of cities in the Bay Area. And so what the objective here is to negotiate a contract with this firm to provide the 6 crossing guards for the upcoming 2018-2019 school year. The funding would come from the sugar-sweetened beverage tax, for at least for this fiscal year, and then I think the council wants to reconsider that in future years. It is a little bit more expensive. It's $124,000, which is more than the payroll costs that we were paying, but it is a substantial, it eliminates a substantial burden on the police department in administering the program and having to pull staff away from other responsibilities in order to fill in an unanticipated vacancy, or to leave an intersection open on an unanticipated basis. The firm has done manages dozens of crossing guard programs throughout California and actually nationwide. So, and I believe they're the only company that's operating in the Bay Area that's essentially an exclusive crossing guard service provider. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we may want to revisit exactly where we put crossing guards, particularly with the mix of schools changing with construction. And but for the time being, for the next school year, we anticipate having 6. And unless there's some immediate change in program, it will be at the 6 locations they've been at in the past.
Great. Questions?
Yeah, will the existing crossing guards be retained and switch employers?
Yes, they will. The existing crossing guards will be given an opportunity to work for this new firm if they wish.
That was my only question.
With the hiring of a private firm, does it significantly change our ability to change the number of crossing guards or the locations that they work at?
I haven't personally had the conversation with the firm. I would imagine they would not have an issue with changing locations. Changing the number up and down is just money. It's just, but I'm.
And staffing,
And
the same problems we would have ourselves.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Great. Any comments from the public?
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeremiah. Thank you for this crossing guard program update. Yeah, so it looks like you're still going to hire the 6 crossing guards. That's great. But you do know that the Albany Police, to each crossing guard, was about $30,000. And with this private company, it's about double. It was $60,000. So you still want to do 6 crossing guards. But just to let you know, if the Albany Police were still doing it, at the same price you're getting 6 with this private company, we can have 12 crossing guards in Albany. So you're paying double per crossing guard, which means if you paid the same amount, we could have twice as many crossing guards. If you look, we got 7 schools, but you only want to hire 6 crossing guards. So you're already down 1 crossing guard per school. So 1 school doesn't get a crossing guard. So, I mean, you got 7 schools and 6 crossing guards. Numbers don't line up. I don't know why there's not 7 crossing guards. And also, you should hire 7 crossing guards in case, you have 6, let's say one doesn't show up. You should have a backup. If you only hire 6, one doesn't show up, well, you only have 5, so where's the emergency relief crossing guard? Where's an extra crossing guard? And how does that work with a private company? They just dispatch a new crossing guard in the morning, someone doesn't show up. So please look into that. And also, it sure would be nice if the city, you guys could talk to the crossing guards, or maybe if the crossing guards can come to one of these meetings, because the crossing guards know a lot more than I do. Their input is, they're the crossing guards. They've been there for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. So it sure would be nice if the city got opinions from the crossing guards on how this whole situation can be better, where the crossing guards feel they should be placed, how many crossing guards the city should employ. So, and also this other thing is, I appreciate you guys wanting to, fix this crossing guard situation, but it seems like you guys are just kind of like, straggling to just figure this out at the last minute. I mean, school's out, now you got to rush and do it before school starts next year. And it's like you guys are just panicking, in the moment. And you guys are just doing what you can. You're just getting money from the soda tax thing. It's obviously not a good idea. I mean, it's to hire crossing guards, and we're going to be paying twice as much for crossing guards on a soda tax, just because it happened to be in a general fund. Always change the soda tax into a specific fund. And this is not a long-term thing for you guys to take money from the soda tax just because the Albany Police doesn't want to take responsibility and wants to not show any responsibility with crossing guards anymore. So please talk to the crossing guards. Thank you.
Thank you.
One piggyback on that. Is the firm have a local employee base? So do they have contracts with like Berkeley or El Cerrito so that when you do have the substitute crossing guards with a contract, that it's pretty easy to pull from?
I'm not sure where their closest current clients are. But yes, that's the idea, is if someone calls in sick some morning, they've got somebody that will be here to cover, and if they're not here, they won't charge us. If something happens and they just can't cover it. But the idea is that they will, if people go on vacation, their illnesses, whatever, they'll have a substitute and we'll have some continuity. It may not be the same person every time.
Of course.
But that's the way that's the way it's got to be.
Yeah.
I also wanted to follow up on Jeremiah's idea of trying to solicit input from the people who are actually in the field as crossing guards when we discuss issues about school safety. Do we know who they are? Can we send them notices when these items are on the agenda? Do we have any way of communicating? That could be a valuable body of feedback and information.
Of our current, the people that have been our employees.
Well, either them or looking ahead, I guess it's more important to be able to ask the outside company who the current people are. Is there any way we can establish that line of communication and encourage them to come to our meetings so that we can learn from them?
I'm sure we can figure something out. We might have to pay a little bit. Again, they're a professional services firm, so it's as we would have to pay our employees. Unlike Justin and I, we're salaried, but the crossing guards would be paid to attend a meeting. But we could do that if you'd like to hear directly from the people who are in the street every day.
I would say that
for the
we've
school
had
evaluation.
crossing guards come to these meetings before, and as part of the Safe Routes to Schools safety analysis around the borders of schools, the crossing guards are solicited for their input. So that has been a part of the ongoing conversation. Maybe not as visibly as you'd prefer, but it's certainly in there.
Okay, yeah, I guess it doesn't necessarily have to be at the commission meeting as long as someone is talking to them somewhere in the research process.
Yeah, it doesn't take very long to get their opinion on what needs to change or what's the most dangerous. Great. Thank you for that update. As long as we're on announcements and communications, I just want to mention that I've been seeing sidewalk installations around town, and that's ongoing, so it's great to see that.
Yeah.
And I live next door to a place where there's a sidewalk being repaired, and I was notified by mail, and there are marks on the sidewalk, and it's great to see the progress. Thank you. So let's look at the agenda items for upcoming.
So as was requested earlier, we've extended an invitation to Lime Bike for a review. We've requested their update and if they're able to attend at the July meeting. So we'll plan to agendize that in the next month's meeting. We will bring striping.
We'll bring what we have. We just, in the last day or two, received a civil engineering plan set that does show curb ramps and striping for the San Gabriel-Brighton intersection. We haven't received anything about the parking designations and how pickup and drop-off would flow through the new San Gabriel campus, but at least we have something, and we'll bring it to you next month.
Great.
Other items upcoming are modernization of the municipal code, traffic calming program. We're currently working through all the prior approved projects and getting a better inventory of the traffic calming that have been approved and can work towards making them projects in the upcoming capital improvement program funding for traffic calming. Brought up if this body is interested in getting more detail on the Central Avenue projects that were discussed. Interested in your feedback on whether you would like to have a presentation on that in more detail. And then other items, Solano at Kane's bus stop parklet, City of Berkeley, Portland Ave sewer project was referenced earlier that we've received plans now for a pretty major sewer replacement project along Portland Avenue. San Pablo and Buchanan Complete Streets design, as has been referenced in public comment. We plan to bring updated designs to this body in September, along with the second street repave project that Robert referenced, and was also requested that we come back with a discussion of potential impacts of SB 1 repeal.
So back to the middle, the presentation on Central Avenue Corridor Project. I was the only one who expressed an interest in communicating with the city of El Cerrito. Do you guys want to hear about the project overall? Do you, what's your take? And we're only a subset of the commission too here tonight.
I guess for me personally, it's not a high priority to have a more detailed presentation given to this commission. I'm glad that we got to see what we did tonight. I would think probably the rest of the discussion is an El Cerrito discussion that can happen at El Cerrito meetings, but if, I'm not averse to seeing more if people want to, but it's not a high priority for me.
I wouldn't mind it coming back. Yeah, it's not a terribly high priority, but maybe there's a certain milestone where we'd want the project to come back to us. So is that at just conceptual? I don't know if there's another.
Just to be clear, since there were several projects, this is all that there basically is that was presented for the undercrossing, and they're going to be submitting for funding. But there are two projects, one that's underway and a second phase that is City of Richmond is lead on. That was the rerouting of the roadway. Yeah. That was what probably what I would see as probably the most of interest to get more in detail on at this body if the commission is interested. Would be I believe the City of Richmond is the lead, either them or their consultant presenting on that phase 2 of the Central Avenue project.
That's what I'm interested in.
I think to get it in the detail that you presented to us today on the underpass project would be fine, right? I don't know how.
I'm looking to make sure that there is a viable trail using Pierce Street.
Sure.
So at whatever point that we can still have input to that process, I guess would be important to me. Harry, you're nodding.
Yeah, I mean,
Right,
if someone makes a good case that we need to see it, then let's see it, and I think you just did. So
Okay.
I personally don't use that area as much, so I'm not aware of what the weak links in it are.
Well, certainly currently trying to get from Pierce Street in Albany north and northwest to Central Avenue
is tough.
It's really difficult and
it's really tough
and congested. And they're talking about.
I know that area is terribly congested. What I don't know is when we look at a rough design, which elements of it seem like, yes, that's obviously right, and I don't need to see any more detail, or that seems like a good idea, but only if it's done correctly, and I want to see more detail to make sure. And that's where I think someone who's more familiar with the area can judge better how important it is for us to have input, and especially familiar with approaching it from, say, the Pierce Street apartments. That whole corridor that does extend into Albany. So whatever parts of it are relevant to that connection, I think would probably be the most important for us to see.
Justin, do you know where they are on that project? Sorry, Ken.
I will reach out to them and get an update. My understanding is that they provided the realignment sketch that was shown. I don't know how much farther in detail. I don't believe they've secured funding for it. They're putting phase 1 in the ground, but I'll reach out to them and try to get an update where they are on the project.
Like, I don't know if there's significant environmental. I don't think there is, but there's probably certain milestones where we want that project to come to us so that we do have the opportunity to comment and actually get our comments responded to. So it's either going to be like an environmental phase or like no later than maybe 35% design.
It does also require right-of-way purchase.
Right. Well, I guess there are two different illustrations that we were shown tonight.
Yeah.
One shows the the roadway reconfiguration with only sharrows for bike support. And the other one shows a west edge of the street bikeway on Pierce Street. Right. That actually connects at Pierce Street and Central. So that would eliminate the chicane or the going around on the other street for bikes. So that seems like a major difference to me. So that would be the key thing for me.
Sure. That's true.
Okay. Great.
Are you done with this item?
Yeah, do you want to go back to general?
I just want to make sure we considered the issues that were brought up in general public comment at the beginning of the meeting and see if any of those are things we ought to agendize. I think 3 of them probably fall under the category of San Pablo Complete Streets, which is already on the list here. So, so what did we hear about at the beginning of the meeting that was not related to San Pablo Complete Streets?
There was a comment regarding modifying in front of Cornell School to reduce the width of the sidewalk and put in some angle parking, I believe.
Yeah.
Right in front of the Y. So to take
in
out
front of the
that.
YMCA part of Cornell School, yeah.
I also heard some comments from Amy that I don't want to go into right now, but I would love it if you could type those out when you get time. Because you went by really quickly, and I want to follow up on that. Thank you. Yeah.
They're little tweaks. Yes. Thanks.
Weren't there comments about the bike crossing on San Pablo at Washington? There was 2, right?
There were several, 2 comments about that and a third one about general crossings of San Pablo. But I think all of those will be covered when we talk about San Pablo Complete Streets in September.
That will be a substantive agenda item for you. I think you'll have a lot of interested people.
We've piqued some interest. That's good.
And I guess the only other issue that was brought up in general public comment was concern about the cumulative effect of parking loss from the various small changes we've made over the years. And I'm not sure that's something we can agendize exactly, but.
I think it's something to keep in mind as an opinion for the public for the future.
Okay. Motor vehicle parking.
There's a voice that didn't get picked up on the microphone, but I think it said something about differentiating between motor vehicle and bicycle parking. Yeah. Fair enough. So with those comments, I think, with luck, we won't have to re-agendize the slurry seal project.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, please.
Is Gig Car a pilot, or is that a program that's already, like, do we get reports back on that?
We have some relatively new data from them from about, a month ago.
Huh.
We could bring that back to you.
Didn't we talk about 6 months?
I thought we already got an update from Gig Car.
Did we?
1 or 2 months ago, didn't we?
Was it use, or was it already just starting the program?
Some initial data that they provided after the first month or 2 of launch.
Okay. But what is it? What was our agreement on that? Is that a pilot program, or is that?
There's no agreement. That's just their.
They didn't need any permission.
They don't need an agreement to
so
park
it's
their
just
car.
okay.
We're working with them to help them with parking tickets and things like that. But
We expect them to stay here for the long haul. It wasn't like they didn't present it as a trial run.
An assessment or
Presented
anything.
it as
Okay.
They plan to enter Albany.
Doesn't have to be urgent, but I think at some point it'd be good to see some updated usage numbers and any other issues.
I thought we talked about sort of a 6-month time frame. Does that sound familiar?
Sure.
And that would put it in like October, November? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's keep it on the radar for that. Great. Any other announcements or communications? Anybody added a vacation at the end of July that they need to tell us about? You're not part of the quorum, so it's that's between you and Jeff. But I'd love to hear about it later. With that, I'd like to adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks for staying to the ending, Amy. And we'll meet again at the end of July, and we appreciate that. Great. Thank you, staff.